Welcome to Volya Radio. Слава Україні!
Hello, everyone. It is Sunday, October 20th, 6:58 p.m. in New York, 11:58, almost noon almost midnight in London, 2 a.m. in Kyiv, or 1:59, and it is 6:59 a.m. in the workers' paradise of Perth, Australia. Welcome in, everybody. Adam is about to be lifted to co-host too, I think. Do us a favor, folks. I'm so glad to see people coming in so quickly. Please take a sec and share and like and retweet the space just to let people know we're here. Because with us not being on all the time anymore, sometimes it takes people a little while to realize we're here. In fact, I missed a wonderful space yesterday because I didn't know it was going to be on. So anyway. Let people know. You are listening to Volya Radio, information and current news space on Twitter. We wholeheartedly support Ukraine, and we're going to work here, working for Ukraine's victory every day. And with that, I'm getting all these. Okay, unfortunately, we have air alerts in Kyiv again, but that seems to be just about a constant thing these days in Kyiv. It's a rough situation. But anyway, with that, welcome, Adam. Nice to see you. Доброго вечора.
Доброго вечора, Pani Robin. Yeah, air alerts in Kyiv. That's why we're all here. And it's always the background of whatever we're talking about. We have our little book club and our little distraction here from the frontline stuff. But we're not trying ever to distract from what's going on there, just to illustrate that Ukraine is more than blood and bullets, folks. And so we'll talk about some books, and we'll talk about some songs and some stories and other things. What am I going on about, Robin?
It's a little hard to get started these days. We're used to coming in on another show and God willing, we'll get back to that soon. But anyway, yeah, I was just looking at a book today I have of it's called Sto Kazok. It's a 100 folk tales. It's beautiful. It comes from that press in Kharkiv that the Russians bombed, actually. But it's had a cute little poem. Sometime I'll share it with you. Just a cute little poem welcoming you to the book about Kaskas and Kashka. It's really very cute. Anyway, but yes, as Adam is saying, we are here. We're here to cover the news, but we're also here to let people. People are discovering Ukraine. Ukraine has always had a wonderful culture, very rich culture, rich history, and people are discovering it now. So part of what we do here, especially with our book club and with our cultural segment that we're going to be starting now, is celebrate Ukrainian culture and reminding ourselves and everyone else why Ukraine is such a unique place and why it is so worthy of being rescued from the genocidal invasion by their inhospitable northern neighbors. No country should be.
Yes. And historic oppressors for centuries and centuries.
Good point. Speaking of that, well, I'll tell you what, Adam, why don't we just take 10 minutes? I think I'd like to go over just, some of the top stories of the day, since now that we're not on 24/7, people do come in looking for the news. Number one is something that yet another red line that should mean that NATO immediately gets involved. It appears South Korea has has released information with photographs showing what we all knew anyway, but that the United States was insisting they weren't 100% sure of, which is that North Korean soldiers in the thousands are now fighting in Russia. Um, the United States has released um, a statement saying, "Oh, this shows how desperate the Russians are." But as somebody pointed out, yeah, they're desperate, and so what? So what are you going to do about it? It's fine. They're desperate. They're still killing a lot of Ukrainians every day. More Russians are dying, but for every dead, every 10 dead Russians, there's a dead Ukrainian, and that's too much. I was happy.
That's one too many.
Yes, exactly. I the U.S. Select Committee on Intelligence Chairman Michael Turner is pushing pretty forcefully that the United States needs to react strongly. Should be a red line for the United States and NATO, he said. I absolutely agree. As he said, this is talking about escalation. This is a major escalation of the conflict. This is making this into a world war, no longer a European war. When you have people coming, I mean, and it was already the case with China and Iran anyway. But good for Michael Turner. He's really trying to push to at least he's at least making the point that this is something that should change our calculus on the war. Over to you, Adam.
Yeah, I can't agree more, and I can't agree more wholeheartedly. And it's also one of those things, like the calculus on this war should have been different from the start, and I'm sure anyone listening here agrees on that front. And here we are. And so for us in our community, it's every time one of our red lines that should be red lines is crossed, we feel stupid and useless because our governments are acting in the same way that the that the mafia Kremlin is, which is just putting up fake red lines. And it was never stated as a red line, because who would have thought? Like, let's think about it. Like 10 years ago, North Korean troops are going to be fighting in Ukraine in 10 years. Like, what kind of drugs would that person have had to do to come to that conclusion?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it is right. It does show Russian desperation that all they have left to fall back on is North Koreans, and it is also true that North Korean soldiers are not actually trained up to NATO standards. They're not going to be probably much more effective than the Russian soldiers who they're grabbing off the streets in backwoods backwoods towns and sending to the front. But it is more meat. It is more people who are going to be sacrificed running at Ukrainian positions and causing Ukrainian deaths. So it's well, I hope to see our government doing something other than thoughts and prayers for a change.
Exactly. Deeply concerned deeply, gravely, deeply concerned. Uh, um, Go ahead, James.
26 million people in North Korea. They're sending that many. It's going to be a little over a week before they're all dead, or that number of people at least. So it isn't huge, but it is the start, because behind that is China, and China is now apparently sending assembled weapons. So they're in the war now. They're actually part of the genocide. North Korea is. And if North Korea is let slide into this war without reacting, then China. And how many million people do they have? Well, anyways, it doesn't matter. It's way too many, and they can afford to throw too many people, and so something has to be done. So I say it's either send or allow, deep strikes into Russia, or let Ukraine have nukes, or send 100,000 soldiers and equipment. And that ought to be easy to decide. But it's the kind of thing they need to get on the stick with, and you cannot hide behind the way that we're fighting right now forever, right? This business about we're bystander countries per the United Nations rules, it's a shame in a way. It's great in a way because we're not at war directly with Russia right now. And I know Joe Biden wants to do everything to avoid that for, scary nuke reasons. But it's time. I mean, it is really time to step it up. Either, let them have the nukes or send them the soldiers or let them do deep strikes or better yet, all three.
Yeah, well said, James.
James
Yeah.
brought up another great piece of semi-current news, which was the trending nukes or NATO a decision, which I'm so glad that Ukraine's leadership is speaking in this way, because I think it brings also into focus the global nuclear proliferation that will happen if might is right is the law of the land. And has anyone seen, question for the audience, come up and talk to us, has anyone seen any hot takes from the Kremlin Huila is our friend, is not our enemy crowd, in Tenki and far right MAGA circles? Now that not only are North Korean troops fighting for Absurdistan, also Huila signed a long-term strategic partnership with North Korea. So it's a lot easier for them to say, "Oh no, Russia's not our enemy. They have good family values." And now, literally, their best buddy is Iran and North Korea signed actual law, international treaties of strategic partnerships with these guys, and here we are. They can't. Yeah, it's like the paradigm is so changed, and I feel like the two things are the public doesn't know about it, like they just don't know that most of the people that we live with in our Western societies just over their heads, and our leaders just aren't ready for it. Anyways, what were you going to say,
No, I was
Robert?
just going to say. I mean, you think about how pathetic it is. Who has Zelensky signed mutual defense pacts with lately? Some pretty first-rate countries. Russia is reduced to state visits to North Korea and cozying up to Iran and China. But it's who could have guessed any of that 10 years ago? The second greatest army in the world, right? And all the only friends he's got left really are North Korea. Even China, I find it interesting. James brought up China. I find it interesting that you know, North Korea doesn't sneeze without getting China's permission. So in this, I think North Korea may be acting a little bit as a proxy for China, but it does show that China has not had a lot of appetite for this war. They have actually pushed back on Putin a few times. So it's just interesting to see. I don't necessarily think that North Korea getting involved is going to lead to China, because I think China is smart enough to realize it's a losing proposition. China's approach is a lot more insidious, and they're not gonna kill their golden goose by getting put under sanctions and messing up the consumer goods that they sell to the rest of the world by getting too directly involved in this. But it is interesting. It's a very there's a lot going on that we don't see that behind the scene. Anyway, back to you.
Yeah, exactly. But I'd agree with James that they're the proxy, and that's the logical next step for their further involvement. And yeah, go ahead, James.
Well, I thought I'd give happy news, and I think it is really happy news. Let's see if you can guess what these are. 1,440, 1,420, 1,530, 1,380, 1,340.
Wow, all of
Well,
those. Yeah, you go ahead, Adam.
was it the times that Volya executed people for sneezing in his presence in the last 5 years?
No, but I like that Gus a lot. But no, those are the times I go to the bathroom. No, that's not what they are either. No, you know that it's Russian personnel losses, the last of the days here. That's pretty amazing. This is like a new record if you're, geeky like that. 1300. They're all higher than that for the first time in, well, a long, long time. I don't know that they've had this run even back at the start, but this has been a kick-ass week.
Amazing. Yeah, I was seeing something, just a tweet that I ran across where um, I don't remember whether it was the New York Times, it might have been the Times of London, but whatever, talking about the news coverage, saying that Russia, it took over of Avdiivka, and now it's been on the march ever since. And then they pointed out that on the march in like 8 months they've gone like a kilometer maybe. But this is it. These along with making very little headway, it's the number of people they're losing day by day is just astonishing. I it's well, it's just it shows what the bankrupt morality of the country, that they could sacrifice so many of their people day after day after day for nothing. I mean, they're not only for nothing they should never have started this war, but also for nothing they're not getting anywhere by doing this either.
And also the attitude that it portends in the West of like, oh, Russia's advancing. The bad guys are advancing. Everybody, abandon your allies and run for the hills, you cowardly losers. Like, what?
Yeah, exactly. And in the meantime, people closest to what's actually going on, there was a huge rally in Georgia. Maybe it's yesterday by now. Yeah, I think it's past the midnight. Tens of thousands of Georgian rallies in support of EU accession ahead of the upcoming parliamentary election. And these are tens of thousands of people who are taking a risk by going out in with Georgia, with that pro-Russian party having quite a lot of clout at this point. In another story that is actually, it's become a little bit heartbreaking. The elections in Moldova, the presidential elections were today, and Maya Sandu was expected to win by quite a margin, which she was doing most of the day until quite recently. The numbers turned around rather markedly and suddenly, and you can guess as to what people suspect is happening. Um, it looks as though the EU, the voting for the EU is not going to go. It's not going to come out positive. Sandu, they're expecting to win, but there may be a runoff now. Just a sobering message to remember that we could be seeing. I'm sure are already seeing Russian meddling at an election closer to home. In fact, the U.S. has offered, where is this, a $10 million reward for information on a Russian media organization called, connected, called Rybar. It's connected with
Rybar.
Margarita whatever her name is, that and it was I've forgotten that this was Prigozhin started this. But anyway, the Justice Department is concerned enough about it, offering a $10 million reward for information about this organization meddling in the American elections, which makes one think that this is probably pretty serious. Yeah.
Hey, Robin.
Yes, dear.
They're headquartered in St. Petersburg. Bomb them. Give me $10 million. Thank you.
Oh, I like it. I like it. Yes, it definitely. A few strategically placed bombs would really make things much easier. There have been a few strategically placed bombs, though. We're going to go to Lexicon. I'm going to talk about two of the large booms that Mockers was enjoying this morning. Over to you, Lexicon.
Well, just as you were bringing me up, there was a cutout for what the $1 million reward is for. What kind of information can I get?
$10
$10
million
million?
for dollars for information concerning Rybar, the Russian media organization, if for evidence that they're meddling in the U.S. elections.
Oh my goodness, the U.S. is offering.
Not to be confused with the $1 million rewards that are currently messing with the U.S. election.
Good heaven! Yes, the buying of signatures by Leon. Oh my goodness.
Ah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, well, that could have nothing to do with Russia, I'm sure.
No, it's just dollars, Yankee dollars. Well, I was going to bring one up, but it's just about impossible. I should be sitting at my computer. I can't do all this on my phone. There's a pretty interesting article that Maria Popova, one of our favorite authors, um, posted on Twitter, a float, and she picks up on BBC Steve Rosenberg's article about this article that's in one of these so-called independent journals in Russia, owned by, huh, the guy's name is a tacit peace proposal from the Kremlin question mark. So Rosenberg analyzes it. Anders Aslund analyzes adds to his analysis, and then Maria Popova makes her statement on the import of it all, but and her takeaways from the main thing. Actually, I'll leave you to search through any one of those names. The guy's name, it's like Ryamchom or something, but he's a guy who's a friend of one of the oligarchs, if not himself a minigarch, and his journal is used to float things that can be disavowed, deniability. And but the 3 points that Professor Popova draws out are that yes, Putin's going to the wall for this war, that he can't die till this is resolved, sort of thing, and that what absolutely has to happen is getting to the borders of Donbas. So that's like so-called Novorossiya has now seems to be these two provinces and the land bridge to Crimea. And what seems quite sensational, a recognition and admission that Ukraine does exist, although its government's totally illegitimate, and therefore they would only negotiate with the West, i.e. Joe Biden. And what Rosenberg or somebody or Aslan says is that it's obvious that they could see that neither Trump nor Harris would be so stupid as to fall for this. Only Biden might possibly fall for this tacit peace proposal. And so they hope he hurries up and does it. But anyway, so the whole thing's a lark if you like following threads behind threads. But that was my latest on what Putin's up to floating through his nefarious networks. That's it.
Thank you. Yeah, this is this he has a history of doing this. So one of the things I think I'm sure you've run into in reading our our book club book is the attempts to muddy the waters by floating fake attempts at peace proposals that are clearly ridiculous and that will never go anywhere, but get people thinking that he might be reasonable, which of course he is not at all. Anyway, I see we have a hand. Casper, let's go over to you.
Hello, everyone. I would have a few words to add on the situation in Moldovan elections. So, on the inside, there are a couple of things I would like to touch upon. So, for example, Gagauzia is something like 95% is for Russia. That's like a region in the south, kind of with a separatistic history, autonomy, whatever. In the north, it's also pretty sad, but Chisinau, the capital, is like mostly pro Europe. It's like 56. And I would like to ask this kind of people, why did you elect a guy from ex-communist or whatever socialist party from both of them? Like, be comprehensive. If that will be a lose in this referendum, that would be one lesson. Be damn like, make sense, please, guys. Like, don't. Okay, I'll go further. Now everything matters on the diaspora. So there is an internal vote, there is a diaspora vote. Everywhere in the world, there are Moldovans, and it depends on them. Did they raise their damn ass from their damn couches to go? Some people, yeah, went, I don't know, 1,000 kilometers, a couple hundred kilometers, and it's up to these people to vote. And to give you some numbers, uh, at our 1:10 from Chisinau time, the difference in favor of no is 72,000 people, but yet there is still to count 170,000 votes. And generally, to give you an impression how it looks on the external percentage, it's now at least 76% for yes and no, 23% on the external vote only. You can try to do your math, and yeah, so the difference might be, couple thousands. So that would be another lesson. Vote. If you have no voice, you don't matter. That's it. And the elections are won by undecided. Yes, there are always people who are damn stupid. There are always people who are maybe damn radicals. But there are always people who you might not like, even in your own, far right, far left, political, whatever positions.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. That's very, very well said. Very well said. Any Casper, anything else before we?
I'll make my mind. Maybe I'll come up with more information. But yeah, that would be it. Thank you.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just saw there was just as a new tweet that I saw that Maya Sandu is saying that their criminal groups, along with foreign forces, and we know what foreign forces means, spend tens of millions of euros, and she is at least saying that they think that they bought 300,000 votes in the election, which is a pretty horrifying thing. Certainly is possible. I mean, this is again, Russia has formed for this. They did do it over and over. So we just hope. I hope, as Casper's saying, I hope that the Moldovan diaspora has gotten to the polls and has cast enough votes to overcome this, Russian manipulation. Um, it's well, it's a lesson for all of us to remember, and it certainly will be, when Ukraine, well, God willing, by the time Ukraine is able to have elections, which will be soon, that Russia will be in no position to do this anymore because they have undermined country after country. I'm hoping in Georgia that the Georgians are able to get an election free from that amount of Russian tampering that could change the results. Um, all right, I have a couple of other things that I actually happier thoughts too. One of which is Ukraine has developed apparently a drone to intercept Shahids. It's called the Wild Hornets. It can fly at speeds of over 160 kilometers an hour and up to at an altitude of about 3 kilometers. It's a quadcopter. It's not a really massively expensive. It's as low cost drones. Like it's similar to something called the Sting. So this is a real innovation. This is something that I think Ukraine will probably be able to produce in country, and it means not having to use more expensive solutions. It's also one of these FPV drones it's FPV drone, but it also will have a AI guided targeting system in future versions, so they'll be able to guide it, with a headset, actually seeing what's in front of it, but at the same time they'll be able to lock on once they have a target in sight. So this is a great innovation. This I think could be very helpful. And along with that, this I think I'm not sure which is greater news. I mean, this is certainly news about something that causes even a lot more destruction. Ukraine's air defense has downed a Kh-90-69 missile using a cluster warhead for the first time. So this is again, this is the first time Ukraine's air defense has intercepted this kind of a missile. Again, this is another, if they're able to do this, this will make Ukraine cities much safer. See, according to Ukrainian Air Force, the Russian military launched over 100 targets against Ukraine overnight on October 18th. 96 drones, 6 missiles. The Ukraine Air Defense intercepted 4 Kh-59-69 missiles and 42 drones. And additionally, and this is a big thing too, 46 Russian drones went missing due to the operation of EW systems, electronic warfare. So, unfortunately, there's no way you can stop everything 100%. But Ukraine continues to innovate and build new systems and use old systems in innovative ways to try to safeguard the safety of the populations under nightly attack by the Russians. Back to you, Adam.
That's amazing news. Oh, where are the folks who didn't want to give the cluster munitions now?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, they're so scary. They're so scary. Meanwhile, the Russians were using cluster munitions on residential areas, and that didn't seem to, isn't it amazing? I mean, I find it so frustrating. This happens to Israel too. The double standards. The Russians can get away with anything. The most those horrific things. Where are the big yelling and screaming about their ever increasing tendency to execute POWs? Nobody says anything. It's like, well, we know they're barbarians. You expect them to do, but we expect Ukraine to hold to a higher standard. I mean, it's infuriating. It's just not right.
No, and it's part of the forest for the trees thing that I've been finding is a constant theme with all of this Kremlin fire hose of disinformation, muddying the waters on every front, everywhere, all the time, to confuse people about what the real issue is, which is genocide.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I've got one more story, and then I think Adam has selected a couple of really juicy articles that we want to go into in the half hour we have before book club. The last thing I just wanted to bring up is, according to Le Monde, the French paper, U.S. may, and I say may, unfortunately, may lift veto on Ukraine's NATO invitation if Harris wins the election. So there apparently have been hints that actually that if Harris wins, that Biden actually may drop all of his objections to Ukraine being invited to join NATO. Now, that doesn't mean that Ukraine will become a member of NATO now, but that the invitation could be issued to start, continue in that direction. So we're not a 501c3 here, folks. So we can say, if you're in the United States, I, as a longtime Republican and now an independent, I'm voting for Harris, and I encourage anyone who cares about Ukraine to do the same. Not because I like her particularly, not because I like any of her domestic policies necessarily, but we have to do what we need to do so that Ukraine can win this war. The United States can survive whatever happens to us internally, because with a president who we might not like that much, internal policies, Ukraine cannot survive 4 years of a different administration. So, as I said, we're not a 501c3, so we have no problem with saying get out and go and vote for Harris, and let's get this taken care of. We can fight over the internal stuff later on after Ukraine has won the war. That's so liberating. Okay, Adam, over to you. Let's go to our cultural stuff.
And not to mention the other guy's most recent crime, which, as Primus, our fellow co-host Primus, brought to my attention, which is ruining one of my favorite drinks forever. Thanks, guy.
Oh dear, what was that? I missed it.
The Arnold Palmer.
Oh God, that's right. All right, never mind. Enough said.
Stolen joke, fully stolen from Primus in the back channels. Thanks, man. I'm sure no one will remember if you decide to say it on here later. Go ahead, James.
Well, there was a picture of Arnold and Arnold Palmer, that is, and Trump together. So yes, he did have a big dick. Anyways,
James.
I'm sorry, it probably came out wrong.
No, I think it came out just right. This, folks, this is James Healy unleashed. This is the new, as you know, Shaggy talks about Shaggy 2.0. We're definitely getting James 2.0 lately. I love it.
Hachi Machi.
One
Yeah.
day the
Enough of that
villagers
talk. I
will
started it.
regret it, though.
Oh, but there is one thing. Did you guys see that delicious video of Jake Tapper grilling Moscow Mike, the speaker, Mike Johnson, about the Arnold Palmer thing, where he just breaks down at the end of it and he's like, please don't say that.
Oh, I miss all the good stuff.
He just didn't want to talk about it. He's like, we don't have to talk about it. And he's like, but your guy said it. Why is he talking about it in Pennsylvania 17 days to the election? And poor Moscow Mike broke down and just, it was to me it was a peek under the veil of a person who might have some values privately that are being publicly dragged through the mud because of his association.
Yeah.
Anyways,
This is something that I've never understood, what the attraction is to Trump for evangelical voters. I mean, his behavior, the way he talks, everything is, it's like it should be anathema. It's very odd. But anyway, we don't have to solve that. Why don't we well, I'll give it back to you, Adam. But you, as I said, you picked a couple of really good stories that it would be great to have some time to go into. But back to you.
well, which one do you think? A couple of them are older, and I always end up passing by those ones because then they end up at the bottom of the list forever.
Yeah, well, that's
and
true.
they get so old and moldy, and then you don't want to say them anymore.
Well, I like the
But
first two. I mean, the first one.
yeah,
So just since we have people listening, the first one is Putin's use and abuse of history as a political weapon, which, I mean, it's a very good article. These are both from Euromaidan. Oh, that's Ukraine World. I'm sorry, that's from Ukraine World. Euromaidan Press is about problems with freedom of the press in contemporary Ukraine, which is also a difficult topic that we will have to discuss at some point. But I don't know, up to you.
yeah. Let's go to, we all know the Cynthia R. Nielsen seemed to be a pretty, we all know it's an old story for us, the first story on my list of Huila's use and abuse of history as a political weapon. And in the light of trying to be good democratic citizens, let's go to the second story, which points a light at some of the problems that democracies might have under existential war, martial law, and how Ukrainians journalists are keeping to their integrity, even so. And it doesn't mean that anyone is a terrible actor and that Zelensky is evil or whatever, but I just want to preface this by saying it's part of our job is to keep our leaders transparent and make sure that they do what they're supposed to, because especially in existential times, um, shortcuts are taken. So this is from Euromaidan Press, and the headline is Echoes of Yanukovych era state censorship rock Ukrainian state media, Ukrinform. So Alexei Matsuka now finds himself at the center of a censorship scandal that has rocked Ukrainian state news agency Ukrinform during his brief but tumultuous tenure as Director General. Ukrinform, I'm going to have to decide which way I say that as I go forward, but it hasn't happened yet. Sorry, Robin. Ukrinform, one of Ukraine's two state media Medias finds itself in the center of a scandal that brings back memories of an era of state censorship and media seizure, raising concerns for Ukrainian media freedom. Its former director, Oleksiy Matsuka, once celebrated as one of Reporters Without Borders' 100 information heroes, allegedly attempted to censor content in favor of the authorities, particularly the office of the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, during his 6-month tenure. This included the circulating of desirable and undesirable guest lists for journalists, leading to the departure of dozens of media workers. The scandal gained international attention, with Ukrainian journalists meeting G7 ambassadors to raise concerns about pressure from the president's office. Following the scandal, Oleksiy Matsuka was replaced with Serhiy Cherevati, a military journalist and former military spokesman. While this may seem like a positive move given the military's current authority in Ukrainian society, questions remain about the lack of an open competition or the creation of an oversight board to ensure Ukrinform's independence. I'll just pause here to say I love how post-Maidan Ukrainian people of all stripes strive to keep, and even in this existential crisis, strive to keep their leaders transparent. The explosive Ukrainska Pravda report on this matter, co-authored by Roman Kravets and Angelina Strashkulich, the latter a former Ukrinform employee who witnessed some of the events, shook the media landscape. Few realized the full scale of the agency's turmoil until then. Euromaidan press sought to investigate further, benefiting from Ukrainska Pravda's revelations. Next section, bonuses, advisors, and influence. Founded in 1918, Ukrinform has seen various governments over its century-plus lifetime, united by the belief that the state media should serve those in power. Memories are still fresh of the agency's servitude to the ruling party of regions, as Ukraine was headed down the path of authoritarianism during the presidency of Viktor Yanukovych. Ukrainska Pravda writes, to this day, Ukrinform's photo bank contains no photos from the Euromaidan protests that unseated Yanukovych in 2014. The agency's photographers were forbidden from operating
And
there.
that blew me away.
Crazy. Wow. After the Maidan Revolution, as the spirit of democratic renewal was in the air, Ukrinform received a new director. Veteran journalist Alexander Harchenko managed to raise the agency's status from party newsletter to a reliable media that regularly made it to the reputable whitelist compiled by the Institute of Mass Information. As it appears, the agency's independence ruffled feathers in the current administration under President Zelensky. In November 2023, as Harchenko's 10-year contract expired, Oleksiy Matsuka, a native of Russian-occupied Donetsk, was appointed Director General. His background included founding Novosti Donbasa, working at RFE/RL's Kyiv bureau. Don't know what those
Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty.
there it is. Thank you. And heading the Russian language state TV channel Freedom. Matsuka also participated in Western journalism programs. And heading the Russian language TV channel Freedom, no relation. Matsuka also participated in Western journalism programs and organized the Donbas Media Forum with Western funding. He received accolades like being named one of the Reporters Without Borders 100 Information Heroes in 2014 and the International Press Freedom Award from Canadian Journalists for Free Expression also in 2014. With over 300 staff across Ukraine and 11 foreign bureaus, Matsuka needed a leadership team. The president's office helped, quote unquote, by bringing people close to Andriy Yermak, the head of the Ukrainian president's office, Yehor Sihara, with no media experience but ties to Yermak's advisors, Daria Zarivna and Vladislav Vlasyuk, became Matsuka's deputy for personnel and the Ukrainska Pravda investigation says. Vlastyuk regularly visited Ukrinform, advising Siharov on operations like the website, marketing, and communications. Siharov hired people affiliated with Zarivna's Vector magazine, such as its CEO consulting the marketing team. Zarivna claimed distance from Vector since the invasion. Overall, I don't see a conspiracy. Good professionals are scarce, but asked if I would have objected, I just didn't know, she told Ukrainska Pravda. Another Yermak advisor said he, Lishchenko, launched his show on Ukrinform's YouTube channel, claiming it was his personal initiative, not the office's. We discussed how to diversify the YouTube lineup with a frontline diary, more eye-catching titles. I suggested publishing more short videos on Telegram and being more active on X, that Twitter thing. That was all we talked about, said Lishchenko. Matsuka secured hefty bonuses for himself and his deputy Siharyov from January to April 2024. 287% of their base salaries, according to Ukraine's Ministry of Culture and Information Policy. In contrast, longtime deputy director Irina Cherednichenko received only a 40% bonus. That's gross. Not my, I got that name, but that's 280% of your 87% of your base salary. Imagine that, folks. All my
I can't,
normal friends
I can't
listening.
imagine why anybody would
Jeez
think anything was
Louise.
wrong with that, right? Yeah, I mean, this really, this all reeks.
Yeah, but we are democratic citizens and we love a democratic Ukraine, and this is forest from the trees stuff. We need to be able to look at, we need to be able to hold Zelensky accountable. He's been a good leader in the war, but if this Yermak guy continues to be a big problem, then something needs to be done. Like, it just seems like,
Yeah,
anyways, I don't like it, and I want to keep, discipline of message during wartime, but at the same time, we have to hold them accountable.
yeah,
And
100%.
and sunshine is the best disinfectant.
And also
censorship.
I was gonna say it's not
Okay.
even in Zelensky's real interest to do this because there's the temptation short term to cut down on criticism, but it just festers if you do that, and it makes things worse. So this is really this is a misstep that needs to be corrected, and it shows, as you were saying before, the strength of that post Maidan society. This is all being discussed in public, and nobody's gone through any windows or drunk any plutonium laced tea. So it's unfortunate it's happening, but it does show the strength of Ukrainian democracy that it's being discussed openly. Back to you.
Yeah, and I will just say that this is no reason to not support Ukraine's war effort. You know what I mean? Like, this is more forest for the trees stuff. In the end, it doesn't matter. Maybe people should lose their jobs or go to jail. And we'll deal with that. But in the end, invasion is invasion, genocide is genocide.
And and
Okay,
again, this
going forward,
it's another
this is tough
thing.
for me,
I know
Robin.
it is for me too. I mean, as I've said before, I have Ukrainian friends who have told me we really need to do more of this kind of stuff, and they're absolutely right. It is hard to see, but I think, as with everything else, it's important to remember that the reason that the presidential administration, the reason that Ukraine is under such pressure, is because of a genocidal invasion by an evil empire on its north borders. None of this would be happening otherwise. So we have to always keep a laser focus on exactly whose fault everything is. Back to you, Adam.
Yeah, but also hold leaders accountable. It doesn't mean, like, even if this whole thing blows up and Zelensky goes down in a big scandal, it doesn't matter. He's one guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like Hoylo is one guy. Like, in the end, if that's what has to be, that's what has to be. It doesn't mean that the cause isn't
Yeah,
just.
that's right. We're supporting Ukraine, not Zelensky. I mean, we're supporting Zelensky because he has
Exactly.
been such a wonderful leader. But if, if God forbid he goes down in flames, that's absolutely no reason that our support for Ukraine should waver. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyways, holy moly, TED Talk in here. So the next section of the article is censorship allegations, and this is the meat of it. However, the primary accusation against Oleksiy Matsuka is that he engaged in censorship to favor the current Ukrainian authorities. According to Ukrinform employees who spoke on conditions of anonymity with Ukrainska Pravda, Matsuka regularly shared topics in editorial chats that were desirable to cover, quote unquote, and provided guidance on how to better explain, quote unquote, political, military, and international events. While such practices may exist to some extent in every editorial office, Matsuka's actions went beyond the norm by distributing lists of quote unquote desirable and undesirable interlocutors and experts. In December 2023, Matsuka sent to Ukrinform's regional editorial office files recommending topics for local correspondents and who they should or shouldn't get comments from. Ukrinform employees told Ukrainska Pravda the quote-unquote undesirable voices included opposition figures, organizations, local politicians critical of the government, but also regular citizens directly impacted by the issues. For example, on water supply disruptions in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, long-suffering residents without water were quote-unquote undesirable. For veteran assistance, veterans themselves unable to access aid were deemed undesirable speakers. As well, Matsuka's team instructed Ukrinform's SMM team to not give airtime to military personalities who may be perceived as political competitors to President Zelensky, such as former Commander-in-Chief Valery Zaluzhny. That's gross. That's terrible. And I really hope that didn't come from the top. This contradicted Matsuka's media awards and Western journalism training. Go ahead, Lexicon.
Lexicon is furiously
Or
trying
don't,
to get
whatever,
back to
man.
her screen where she can take the mute.
I'm
There
on
she
my
is.
screen. I'm just furiously trying to avoid my fat finger hitting that wand, whatever it is, even though it should be far enough away. But anyway, yeah, that sounds pretty awful. I mean, the thing is that we've been hearing about the way there's similarly, too similarly, an office in the Kremlin. I mean, it's right out of the president's office, communications or whatever it's called, the old comms, that does a weekly bulletin for Russian media. Now, of course, the penalties are probably more severe, but it's in a sickening style, tells people what the word is to go out this week, which is that's pretty heavy. But and it's certainly well, so it guides the media. I'm wondering. I don't remember how exactly they tell you who to talk to. They certainly do, like when Gherkin's out of favor and Prigozhin and so on, they say don't talk to these guys. We've heard about that. But this is Soviet legacy that Ukraine really doesn't need. Now, so that's disgusting. At the same time, censorship during war is a tried and true phenomenon. We know that during our wars, certainly World War II, I don't have much knowledge of World War One, but we know that there was an office of whatever it was called. It had these funny names like propaganda, war information, things like this that we tolerated then. And so foreign correspondence reports from the front and all that, they had to go through that stuff. I'd love to see something about just what was, it was mainly, I don't think that journalists are being told what they should or shouldn't say, but stuff went through a censor and things that were considered A, a security risk, and B, I mean, oppositional to or undermining of the war effort were censored out. And there's a few famous incidents about reporters who rushed off to London where there was no censor or something from somewhere or other, trying to remember what that was when at the breakout of the war as the French front crumbled. I don't remember. Anyway, Yeah, I'd love to know something about how we used to do it. And
Yeah,
then we know about embedded reporters in Iraq and so on. And I don't know what were the unwritten rules and so on. But just to say it exists, in principle, one has to accept it. But this stuff sounds like beyond beyond the necessary and palatable for sure.
yeah, that is. You brought up a couple of really
It has to be nonpartisan, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, Rob.
Now, I was just going to say, I think Lexicon's brought up a couple of important things. One of which is that that Soviet legacy that Ukraine is intent on ditching, but is unfortunately still, it's like getting over a virus. There's still some of it there. And the other thing, of course, is it is absolutely true that there does have during wartime certain things have to be kept from being published. Obviously, I mean obvious things like where missile emplacements are, when what's going on the front in real time. But unfortunately, what happens is, especially since with civilian control of the military, which is something I think most in the West consider to be a positive thing, but those non-military people who are in charge are mostly political people, and they have their political issues to consider. And this is what's getting mixed up in this. Um, Things that could affect the War Office should be censored, but the war, prosecution of the war. But at the same time, it's bleeding over into things that could make things difficult for the current administration. I also suspect. I mean, I don't know for sure. And President Zelensky is at the top, so he bears, ultimate responsibility. But I've certainly read enough about Andriy Yermak to think that some of the problem may be coming from him. He has always functioned as a bit of a fixer for Zelensky. And I mean, he's been a very, impassioned and good representative, but also some of this may be coming from his him. He's the body man. He's trying to protect his president, but it is not always. This may be part of it, and it's going to backfire if he isn't brought under control. If that's what's going on. Back to you, Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fine line. Of course, there's, pardon me, I just had a air bubble somewhere where it shouldn't have been. It's a fine line during wartime, for OPSEC reasons, like Lexicon said. And maybe even Ukraine Forum doesn't want to um, highlight the current government's failures, such as veteran payments and that water thing and the other things mentioned in the previous paragraphs. But where it really crossed the line for me was the not give airtime to people who might be perceived as political competitors. That's the one that can't be explained by any sort of OPSEC, and it shouldn't have been ever have been a consideration.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, Zaluzhny never, ever, ever in any media in any way expressed political um, ambition towards the presidency. So it also strikes me as paranoid, which is sad too. We've got a hand. Go ahead, William.
Thank you for calling me up. I just wanted to check in before the book club starts tonight and talk about really quickly. I had the honor to meet James the other day. We went together to Wilmington, Ohio, to watch Timothy Snyder give a lecture and meet everybody and talk about Ukraine. And it was a fundraiser actually for the sister city called Marefa. And we got James and I both got his autographs on his book, and it was pretty cool. One thing I was really surprised and did not expect at all is everybody see James's profile picture. Well, that's his actual picture in real life. Uh, I was stunned, but I was a bit surprised that we drove all the way to Wilmington with his head sticking out the window. with his tongue flapping in the breeze. It caught me by surprise.
I love it.
I knew it. I knew it.
I hope you gave him a Scooby snack.
No, it was a good time. James was a great guy, and yeah, it was nice to meet him. He was kind enough to let my son Walter go. So the three of us, yeah, it was a nice evening to see Timothy Snyder. But yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing the book club tonight, though.
Oh, thanks. So this is great. I love, I've had, I think all of us who co-hosts around here, here and there, had a chance to meet listeners and other co-hosts in real life, and it's a very special thing. I mean, I actually maybe meeting up with our friend Alan Brewer in a couple of days for dinner again. It's such a treat when we get to know people pretty well here. I mean, I've never met Adam in person. I may show up in Edmonton at some point. I'll warn you. But it's there's something very special about meeting in person. I'm really glad that you guys were able to meet up and for such a wonderful thing. James, recommended to me that I read that I listened to on Freedom because I was having trouble getting through it reading it, and I've been listening to the recording that Timothy Snyder read himself, and I've really been enjoying it, and I thank you for that, James. It must have been a wonderful evening to I can't imagine actually being in the same physical space with Timothy Snyder and getting to listen to him in person. So I'm happy for both of you guys.
That's awesome. That James is actually a dog. That's my favorite takeaway from all of it. But also the nice meeting people in real life stuff too. I like them both.
Isn't that what it says on
Um,
the internet? No one knows you're a dog. Well, James, you've been outed now.
that's better than me. It's better to be an actual dog person than in my case, which is my dog is actually way more interesting than me in real life. So that's why I use him in that function. But before we go into book club, I know it's 1 minute past the hour, but I'm just going to finish this article because we got to put it in context. So I don't want to leave you guys hanging with Ukraine's fighting all this. None of this is really is some of it. I hate to say it, but is kind of understandable. We don't know how far up to the top these orders that Matsuka was giving went, and I'm sure there'll be an investigation. We'll keep our left eye on it at all times. But let's put it into context with the end of the Euromaidan press story. So, Suspilne success story. Suspilne, Ukraine's national public broadcasting company, can serve as a positive example of how a media with state funding can at the same time be reliable and independent. Its creation in 2014 is viewed as a successful post-Euromaidan reform. According to Detector Media watchdog, Suspilne is one of the few TV channels offering politically independent content, providing an alternative to politicians' efforts to manipulate public discourse for electoral gains. Suspilne's independence is safeguarded by a supervisory board overseeing its management. The board consists of representatives from parliamentary factions and civic associations serving 5-year terms. However, in April 2024, journalists and media groups accused certain politicians and officials of informational and institutional attacks aimed at undermining Suspilne's independence and funding stability. This included an MP from Zelensky's party spreading misinformation about Suspilne's budget and board compensation. These perceived threats to Suspilne's autonomy are seen as dangers to Ukraine's media plurality and democracy. Meanwhile, during a working visit to Finland, Suspilne's CEO Mychailo Wynnyckyj stated that while there is no censorship in Ukraine, only military restrictions. Wynnyckyj cited Ukraine's rise of 18 positions to 61st out of 180 countries in the 2024 World Press Freedom Index as evidence of increasing press freedoms during wartime, folks. So context is king. Ukraine's ongoing journey towards a stronger democracy relies heavily on the country's ability to safeguard the independence and integrity of its media institutions. The Ukrinform controversy has highlighted the challenges faced by state media in maintaining editorial autonomy and resisting political pressures. In contrast, the successful establishment of Suspilne as an independent public broadcaster overseen by a supervisory board offers a model for insulating media organizations from undue influence. However, recent attacks on Suspilne's independence and funding stability serve as a reminder of the constant threats to media freedom and the need for robust defense mechanisms. So I just wanted to finish it off because context is important. Robin?
Yes.
But let's book
Yes.
club it.
And I agree. You know.
Oh, but we might have a.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, we might have an update from
Yes, let's do
Moldova
that
from
first.
Casper.
Sorry, fellas. Before you go, I just got two more points. Before I said that you should get you should go and vote at least once or twice in 4 years. Yeah, that's not gonna be bad for your health. Some walk, and try to make some sense in your choices. Like be the same. Yeah, don't make contradictory choices. And next ones would be from a failed state lessons. I've been asking some buddies which didn't have much attraction to European Union before. Uh, I'm talking about like 10 years period duration, maybe even 15. For me, it was a good sign to see that now, today, they changed. I also hope that in the case of, because of the Ukrainian war, the Ukrainian minority in Moldova, which is quite substantial, would change electoral things like in electoral perspective. I hope they were not the only ones. And that would be the the idea. Be up for paradigms or worldview changes. Um, and last one would be understand your real options. Be realistic or be someone's food. People here, some of them might vote, anti-European Union because they were never out of Moldova. They don't know anything else than pretty much their poorness. Some of them, for example, had maybe some kind of okayish youth in Soviet Union, and since then, for them at least, it might have been going only down. And yeah, now they're old and yeah, whatever. Anyway, people here expect their formal neutrality to do some economic magic. That basically we at some point, we were an offshore and money laundromat for Russia. That was our role in like that system. Uh, Between like a border, like a buffer zone where you clean your money and send them to whatever European banks or whatever you want. They want to become, but yeah, some people think that in magically this way you are gonna become the Switzerland of the East Europe without army and without economy. Uh, yeah, like people should realize that prosperity doesn't fall from the sky like a miracle. You can't be Singapore without lifting a finger. There is a lot of work to do, and if you are not ready to do that work, like you're gonna be someone's food. And in this case, I mean Russians. Okay, thank you. Enjoy your book club, everyone. And I hope I will have maybe at some point good news, final results, which I hope will be positive. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And if you do get them when we're still on, do raise your hand and let us know, because I think we're all concerned about. We're all hoping to hear good news. I don't know how quickly. I gather Moldova, like most countries, is much quicker to get the votes counted than the the United States, who seems to take days and days and days recently. Um, anyway, all right, Adam, book club.
Budmo.
Budmo. We are reading Ukraine's Maidan, Russia's war, and I think did we put that up on the nest? Uh, anyway.
I just did.
Oh, thank you. And then I put a bunch
right
of
up
I
next
put a bunch
to.
of other crap up there too. Sorry, but I
No, it's my job to say sorry.
oh
We haven't promoted the show after us
oh
here.
okay. Actually, not after us on on an independent space, but let's do
No,
that
yeah.
for a minute because I think this is great. Our dear friend Prince Heather, who many of us know, is going to be doing a space tonight. Starting at 9:30, so y'all will be late because you'll want to stay till the end of book club. But it's called the Borscht Chronicles with Princess Cannoli and with Lita, as well as Prince Heather. Those of you who've listened to Prince Heather, especially the times that I've come that she's come on after me, she is constantly touting her easy borscht recipe, which I consider to be an absolute abomination. It's opening up a can of beets and sticking a spoonful of sour cream on it. But anyway, these ladies, Prince Heather, Princess Cannoli, and Lita, they're great entertainment. I'm sure it's going to be interesting and a lot of fun. So as I said, and the question she asks is, what will we find in my fridge this time? Last time they found pickles that I think had expired in 2010 or something like that. So anyway, as I said, please don't ditch us early. But as soon as we're done, I know I'm going to be going over there, and Adam probably will. So I invite everybody to join us. Anyway, okay, Adam, back to book club.
Back to book club. We are back in
Heather just Prince
chapter.
Heather just said texted me. Don't forget the ranch dressing.
Sweet Jeebus.
I'm feeling nauseous. Anyway, I would like to tell you, Adam.
Volya Radio does not officially condone
No,
Easy Boy.
yes, Orb. Yes,
We
exactly.
condone you going over there after our space is done.
And enjoy, but
maybe, but enjoy. But me and Robin personally, were both often offended by the things that went into the Easy Boys.
exactly.
We love you, Heather.
Yeah, I made a mess. I can't cook small amounts, and now that I live by myself, now my kids are grown, it's a little problem. But I made again a huge tureen of borscht, which I have about 6 containers in the freezer now. Boy, you know, Adam, it's getting better and better. I think I really have refined my recipe. At some point, I may have to FedEx you a bowl to critique for me. But anyway, enough of that. Yes. Anyway, so we are reading Mychailo Wynnyckyj's Ukraine's Maidan, Russia's War: A Chronicle and Analysis of the Revolution of Dignity. A serious topic, so we're gonna give off laughing and get on to something serious. We are in chapter 4, Descent into Violence. We have the Maidan is there has been the well, actually, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. We are getting into up to uh, the worst and the climax of everything that went on in the Maidan in those days in 2014. The we talked about we're getting to the point that Yanukovych is beginning to realize that he's on his way out. He was insisting on the Maidan capitulation as the only way forward, and had said that the Maidan would be cleared by force by 6 p.m. on February 19th. But by that afternoon, he had changed his tune, and we don't know for sure what happened, although you can surmise. He was offering to change the constitution, which is one of the demands of the Maidan protesters. They wanted the constitution to be rolled back to the one that gave the president, that distributed power more. Yanukovych has pushed through a new version of the constitution, which concentrated a lot of power in the president's hands. So they wanted to change the constitution. He was offering to change the constitution. He was offering possible early elections, a redo of the executive, blanket amnesty for protesters, and no clearance of the Maidan. But at the same time, he had people busy evacuating valuables from his tacky mansion outside of Kyiv. Um, the there, yeah,
Neharizhia.
yeah, Mizhiri, yeah, I have to.
Moscow phobia.
Yeah. No,
No,
I have to. I
no.
really should have looked this up in Ukrainian. The romanizations I find impossible to figure out how this was pronounced. Anyway, as I said, it was unknown what had caused its change of heart. But at this point, it didn't to some extent it really didn't really matter because people were, just people didn't trust him to start with, and certainly at this point. Um, in the meantime, there was the EU officials and an envoy of Putin had tried to broker a deal between the government and the opposition, but it really showed a lack of understanding of issues on the ground. That this really was not just about the EU association agreement anymore. It had become much more about human dignity and wanting to have a normal country with normal, with normal laws and a rule of law, not a autocracy. Um, then in the meantime, all this is going on. The Russians are taking full advantage. One of the things that it's important to remember is the border was completely open. There was no active belligerency between Russia and Ukraine. So there were high-ranking FSB officers flew into Kyiv on the 20th, and snooped around, and who knows what they did. They ended up in Simferopol on the 27th, which is the day of the attack on Crimea. So they were up to no good. Our next session is snipers. Oh, Adam, do you flag me down if if you want to say something? I just keep on going here.
No, I'm
Okay.
good right now. I will.
Okay, good. The next section is called snipers. Okay, on 9 a.m. In February 20th, the Maidan forces. There was a counterattack against the riot police who were using live ammunition. Um, the riot police retreated from Institutska Street and ran all the way to Pecherska Lava, which is 3 kilometers away. Um, there were snipers on top of Hotel Ukraine and other places who fired on protesters as they pursued the police, and also as they were trying to rebuild the barricades that had been taken down. I want to,
Flagging you down.
huh? Yeah. Okay.
This is one place where I think Ukrainian Night and its portrayal of these events kind of gives you a more visceral.
Yes.
I remember that
Yes.
one story of the February 20th day from the young man who was almost killed and rescued the one person with a gunshot injury.
Yeah. Yeah.
Forget his name. There were so many names, but that
Yeah.
was the same
Yes, it was. And
incident.
yeah, I mean, it's really horrifying. And this is, as I said before, this is in the middle of Europe. It's hard to imagine that this happened, but it did. I do actually want to read a first-person account that Wynnyckyj includes in his book here. Lyubomir Markovich, a Canadian resident in Kyiv, is the Canadian mafia is involved in this, folks. Shh, don't tell Adam. All right. Anyway, but here he
Illegal maple syrup.
exactly. Um, anyway, so this is I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs of his first person account of what was going on at 10 o'clock in the morning on the 20th of February. By the time we got to the Maidan, we came across a war zone. Black smoke was already pouring out of one corner of the Conservatory of Music, and tires were burning all along the perimeter of the barricades. Meanwhile, a Maidan activist stood on stage and directed the deployment of various Sotny regiments to various sectors of the Maidan perimeter to reinforce the Maidan from anticipated counterattacks. More ominously, he directed everyone's attention to snipers being spotted on the hill in front of the Zhovtnevi Palace, October Palace. We were all stunned, and it appeared that many around us were equally shocked as well. What was going on, and why were they firing? No one seemed to know, but it all became irrelevant as stretcher after stretcher carrying the dead and wounded began to be carried out from the front lines. We quickly realized this was war. Live rounds were now being fired, and people were being killed. Before retreating, we made our way to the conservatory to ask the activists there why the building was set on fire. We were told that the Berkut had lobbed grenades or Molotovs into the building where Maidan activists had set up a Red Cross station. It seemed the activists were managing to contain the fire from the inside, and indeed it would soon be put out. The next scene, however, was a jaw-dropper. There, in the entrance to the conservatory, was a group of about 20 activists, armed with semi-automatic weapons, getting ready for whatever their orders happened to be. We left. Over the next few hours, the media was full of reports of armed Berkut units being formed near the building of officers and cabinet of ministers, ostensibly for an all-out attack on the Maidan. And an attack on the Maidan, an attack on citizens peacefully demonstrating. Snipers, in the meantime, continued to do their work, and casualties mounted continuously. Fearing the police would abduct the bodies from city hospitals and secretly cremate them, destroying evidence of death by sniper fire, the Maidan leadership ordered that the bodies be laid out in several spots near the Maidan perimeter and maintained with dignity. Instant shrines began growing up around the bodies, which lay covered with flags and blankets, but with faces exposed for all to see. Various media were seen filming the scene, and people began to congregate to pay their respects. It was surreal. So that was February 20th in the middle of Europe on the Maidan. Okay. So on that morning, 46 people were killed. And at the time of the writing, he says it was unclear who was responsible for the mass killings. I think that became clearer later on, and we'll talk about that when we get there. Snipers were stationed on top of Hotel Ukraina, the Arkada Bank building behind the upper entrance to Khreshchatyk metro station, 7 Institutska Street, a residential building, and maybe the roof of a cabinet minister's building. The snipers used piercing rounds that targeted heads, necks, and chests. The victims had no chance. Okay, accusations that Russia deployed snipers. There were accusations that Russia deployed snipers, or that they were from Georgia, or even Ukrainian nationalists. At the time of the writing, no direct links between sniper fire and the Kremlin had yet been made public. The truth may never be known, and I did not find any conclusive statements about whether or not some of these snipers were actually Russians or not. There certainly have been theories about that, but there's no, and Russia certainly had a lot to do with this happening, but whether they were actually Russian snipers or whether they were Ukrainian snipers who were, egged on by the Russians, we don't know even at this point. Yeah, go ahead.
They were acting on behalf of Ruski Mir, and that's the only thing that really matters.
Yeah, exactly. And, folks, this was only 10 years ago. Look what Ukraine has been through and continues to be going through. The next section, Parliament and Parasiuk. In the afternoon of February 20th, the opposition called members of Parliament to the Rada. There was a postanova, which is a decree, was passed after 10 p.m. that night, and this decree ordered all Interior Ministry troops in Kyiv to cease fire and return to barracks. All live ammunition and lethal weapons should be returned immediately. The blockage of road and rail lines to limit the movements of people was to cease. All anti-terrorist operations of SBU and Interior Ministry were to stop immediately. An investigation of deaths and casualties was to be done, and guilty brought to trial timely by the Prosecutor General. The Cabinet of Ministers is to provide financial compensation to all victims of violence and their families. Activists arrested for participation in the protests were to be released and all cases against them closed. And from now on, only Parliament had the right to declare the state of emergency. The 3 opposition leaders went immediately to negotiate with Yanukovych, mediated by 3 EU reps and a representative of the Russian Federation. The opposition insisted on presenting this deal to the factions first, and then to have it approved by the Maidan Council. Okay, so at this point, this is a proposal, really. The agreement on this next section, agreement on the settlement of the crisis. Um, what was proposed was that within 48 hours there'd be the special law to return the Constitution to the 2004 version of limiting presidential powers. Within 2 weeks, a unity government would be formed. Early presidential elections in December 2014. Remember how many months away that was? I'm talking about February. That meant leaving Yanukovych in power all that time. Occupied government buildings would be cleared and the protesters amnestied. Illegal weapons were to be turned in, violence investigated. No state of emergency was to be declared. The Maidan Council questioned the legitimacy of a deal with the murderer Yanukovych, which I think is a valid way of describing him at this point. In February 21st, the Rada voted to overwhelmingly to reenact the 2004 constitutional amendments. But the issue with all of this, and we'll talk about this as we go on, a lot of this went on without the proper steps being followed because it wasn't possible to. This reenactment of the 2004 Constitution would really needed the president's signature to become law, and he, as we will see very soon, had already hightailed it out of Kyiv on his way to Russia. Was not available to do any kind of signing, but obviously the government could not just, they couldn't just stay in limbo. But we'll get to that in the next chapter. The reaction to all of this on the Maidan at this point, after all the murders and everything, was too little and too late. Many people were appalled that a peace agreement had been signed with a person responsible for over 100 dead and hundreds injured. No one was willing to wait until December for presidential elections. There were demands that the Maidan Council renounce the deal. The Pravi sector representative was ready to storm the government quarter. As Wynnyckyj says, the threat was real and ominous because there were still significant numbers of well-armed SBU troops and other military in Kyiv. Okay, now the last paragraph in this chapter is the evening demonstration lasted until midnight. The crowd in the city center dispersed gradually. Some traveled with the coffins of their fallen comrades to their hometowns and villages to prepare funeral ceremonies. Others huddled in tents, apartments, and common areas. Few in Kyiv slept that night. The morning promised to be decisive. And that is the end of the chapter. Adam, we're going to go on to chapter 5 now, but I want to give you a chance to add whatever you'd like at this point, or any of our listeners.
It's really good context, yeah, for this last section in particular for the events portrayed in the next chapter. And what we're seeing here is that there was a definite disconnect between what the opposition politicians negotiated and what the people on the ground wanted and needed. But we should go to our hands because
Yes, go
James,
ahead.
who's actually a dog and speaks very well in spite of it, is now even more fascinating to listen to than he was before, thanks to William. And then Lexicon.
Harv? No, I appreciate the importance of what just happened in the book, that the government went too far, and it really drove people to realize that this is a government that was going in the wrong direction. So it was very bad, but it was also good in the sense that it woke people up. And, we've been talking about that ourselves, that, nobody wants any kind of Maidan where 100 people get shot or anything like that. But a wake up would be nice. And so maybe wake ups just don't come without blood. And that maybe is just the way history works.
I think it was Jefferson who said was something about the democracy needed to be watered. The tree of democracy needed to be watered by blood or something like that. I mean, it's a horrible thought, but yeah, I mean, one of the things, I mean, the Ukraine has had repeated revolutions, and I know a friend of mine, Ukrainian friend of mine, said, that he hopes that Ukraine will manage to go 10 years without a revolution because they need to get farther beyond that. I certainly hope that's the case. Maybe this war is taking the place of it, but it's since independence and before. I mean, it's been a rough situation. Yeah. Anyway, over to you, Lexicon.
Yeah, they're certainly washing a lot of blood down now. But I thought, yeah, I'm a little bit surprised. This is the day and the night that I remember so well, sitting in Canada out in the eastern townships, east of Montreal, with every television and computer and so on, every device we had trying to monitor what's going on. And the drama, I can remember later on when I go to visit, that stage is still there, or we know where it was. So I'm watching this, and from this stage, I didn't know who everybody was, of course, but I would have liked to see um, Wynnyckyj talk about this. I remember them coming, and from the stage, somebody, whether it's the Maidan council or the people talking to them, it's probably council members who present what is it that these government and mediators are trying to put across. And I've talked about this before with you. I remember them talking about elections I didn't know it was December. Remembered 6 months, but the crowd just roars no, like they want them now. And in the event, it was, I think they held the presidentials in May, and the parliamentary elections were a few months later. And so that was when Poroshenko won. But they also make that offer of freeing political prisoners, and in particular Yulia Tymoshenko, who's in prison, and that they will liberate her in 2 weeks or a month or something. And they all yell no to do it now. It's like, if you guys are saying you're the government, you can do stuff. Well, it doesn't take 2 weeks. Send a helicopter and bring her back. And it was very clear that it wasn't they particularly wanted her to be a leader. They just said, "Get her out, for God's sake." Like, the whole atmosphere was, stop this futzing around. We call it in Quebec, langue de bois, wooden tongues. These politicians who everything has to be so long and complicated and basically unsatisfying for people who have gone through what they've gone through. It's not only all of these deaths that are so shocking, but this whole winter that they have spent, getting fire hoses of water sprayed at them, getting the trade union building basically burnt right out, being under attack. So people have been through tremendous amount, and there's already poor old Ukraine's experience with PTSD. I mean, this is where it starts. And so they are just saying all this baloney is just BS, like we say BS. It makes me think of that. And I'm particularly struck by this paragraph where he says that Radek Sikorsky, who was the foreign minister at that time, as he is again now, of Poland, he was there participating in these attempts at mediation. And Wynnyckyj says that he was caught on video telling a member of this Maidan council, if you don't sign this deal, you'll all be dead. This is your last chance, kind of thing. And he sends out a message on Twitter, so you can't exactly deny it. Good compromise for Ukraine, gives peace a chance, opens the way to reform and to Europe, like as if that's the whole world of Poland and the EU support it. And Wynnyckyj says clearly the Polish foreign minister misunderstood the social mood on Maidan. Well, that's a good sentence. But Sikorsky, that's not the end of rather um dumb remarks coming at, what do you call them, inept, tone deaf remarks coming out of Sikorsky, who lately has suggested that Ukraine give up Crimea, why not, and so on. He just now and then really puts his foot in it, and I don't know what's in this guy's head. But at any rate, the main point I had wanted to make was that the mood here, it was really stunning. And seeing these negotiators, whether and these are the people that I told you an author I was interested in talked about the government, the opposition, and the street, and how the street became Maidan became, not just of itself but for itself. And it's here, and it's got a voice, and it's evolved a leadership, and a mood, and in a sense, a kind of essence of a program. And whatever it is, it's not all written down, but they know what it isn't, and they know what they want right now. And I think that they wanted no more of Yanukovych, presidential elections right away to get rid of him, no deals that let him hang around in office, and a new parliament. And of course, yes, of course, everybody wanted to revert to the earlier constitution that he had usurped. So that stuff, I think those are important things to underline later on or immediately when Russia starts calling all of this a coup and so on, and that it was orchestrated by, in fact, these very negotiators. I think you can see really clearly that the street, Maidan, was speaking for itself and was not interested in the deal making, the usual kind of deal making that they'd put up with for years and years and years. And this time they didn't want it to be that way. And I do recall that subsequently lots of new people went into parliament, unlike the Orange Revolution and Ukrainian people's disappointment that the same old faces like the Mad Hatter's Tea Party, everybody just moved around and nobody got a clean cup except the Mad Hatter. So, and it wasn't like that, that this time new people came in and they hoped that something more than what had always happened before would come about. So I think that mood is worth underlining. And I mean, I only saw it from a TV set, but I just will never forget it. And of course, so we just sat there. You could hardly go to sleep at night wondering what would happen. And that sets the stage for the next morning as he writes. Everybody was wondering, where is Yanukovych? So back to you guys.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, as you were saying, I mean, it's sort of surprising too because Radek Sikorski was in Poland for Solidarity, and Solidarity was the same kind of revolution of people demanding their rights as citizens of a European country, very similar to what went on in Ukraine, and somehow I guess coming in as a politician and a negotiator, he somehow lost sight of that. I find him very confusing too. I mean, he's been a huge friend to Ukraine for many years, but every once in a while he just lets loose with these ridiculous comments. The other thing too, I mean, tone deafness. Um, I've heard from people who were there at the time that day after after all of those people were killed. That next day, most of the day was spent with coffins being brought two by two to the stage on the Maidan. And the Plivikacha, that beautiful song, that heartbreaking song that's played at every funeral, military funeral now, was played over and over. And as the coffins were brought to the stage, and then on to vehicles that were going to bring them all over Ukraine for burial. After that happened, to propose that the person who directed this should stay in office until December. I mean, that was unconscionable. I mean, it's an abomination. And the fact that that these negotiators didn't understand that by themselves is it's a little bit mind blowing. Anyway, yeah, go ahead.
And I think he goes into it in the second part of the book. I'm very, very excited to read the second part of the book with all the great minds here in our book club, because this guy didn't understand all of it his first time through, and I'm sure you all will help me get a better grasp of it. But because as we can't forget that the first part one of this book is a chronicle, and part 2 is an analysis of the revolution itself. And so it'll be interesting to see how much of these subjects Mychailo touches on later on in part 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too. I think it's going to be. I think it's going to require a lot of close reading. But yeah, this is a wonderful book. I mean, just even in terms of the first person accounts. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that analysis. All right. Anyway, so this chapter is called Climax and Recall, chapter 5. This is basically the first 3 months post Yanukovych. There was a short-lived euphoria and mixed, of course, with mourning for all the people who had died. Right at the same time was the shock of the invasion of Crimea, um, which happened almost, pretty much immediately. And the start of foreign-inspired violence in Donbas, which was later shown to be a covert operation to splinter off the area of what Putin called Novorossiya. Novorossiya was a designation of a certain area of Ukraine under Catherine the Not So Great. He expanded it. He's expanded it quite a lot to try to, basically saying everything he wants of Ukraine. He's going to call Novorossiya. This Russian meddling was not understood particularly in the West.
Oh, heck no. Running back to my microphone. It's still not understood at all. They have a talent for muddying the waters, these Moscows, to the point where we forget our values in dealing with each other, as seen by the effect of their propaganda on some of the residents of eastern Ukraine at the time. And I would say that this is very relevant to us today with 16 days to your guys' very, very important election. We see evidence of their experience gained on this front of the information war in our own politics in the West every day. The muddying the waters, the lack of nuance, all of it, the fire hose, blah.
Yep, exactly. So anyway, this and talking about this is a time of great uncertainty. There was a legitimacy crisis of the central government. I referred to some of it before because changes had to be made, but the people were not in place who, according to the Constitution, would have been the ones who'd have to sign off on the changes. So until the presidential election, it was a time of there were serious, especially the other countries had serious questions about the legitimacy of the central government. And Adam has a comment about that.
Holy smokes.
Adam went crazy this time, but it's right. Go ahead.
So, why is this a question? Like, the fire hose makes us blind to a lot of stuff and distracts us. It's especially in considering ensuing events such as the full-scale invasion. How can we expect any country's founding documents to survive this level of existential fuckery, for lack of a better term? This is also extremely relevant in our societies today. Like, I'll echo my last comment. I completely understand the author's need to address it, of course, to non-Ukrainian maximalist audience, such as that we are. But so much of these controversies seem like not seeing the forest through the trees situation. But the poor Ukrainians continue to have to explain themselves. And he does a good job of explaining why it was a little bit on edge. But, there was no clause in Ukrainian's constitution, the 2004 version or the pre-2004 version, for a guy that just leaves his job without telling anybody. Go ahead, Lexicon.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's going to be very interesting to get to the next section. It's fun kind of going along here along with everybody and not having read ahead as I often do. But yeah, you're right that the more analytical stuff will happen, but you're really conscious reading that if he'd been writing this knowing what he knows today, of course, there's a lot of explaining that he felt necessary to do then that he wouldn't be feeling like today, like falling all over himself to
Exactly.
talk about all of these contortions that they went through to make sure that they were doing things according to the rules and the laws and the Constitution. And later on, he gets upset about their fatal mistake of enacting some law to get rid of a law in Russian language, and that thing ends up failing constitutionally in any case. But he's so concerned that it was a terrible mistake. So yeah, that's part of it. It's interesting because he writes this about 2018 or so, I think. It's published in 2019. So it's like he's got no idea, like everybody else in the country, what could actually happen, even though he does know things by the time of writing, like that Yanukovych was already packing his stuff something like the 20th of February, while pretending to make deals on the 21st, maybe the 19th. Anyway, the packing starts, and they've got the videotapes, of course, of not just the night he fled, but earlier. And so there's evidence of all of this, plus lots of evidence of what Putin had set up and troop movements and stuff. So, but the author cannot, even in 2018 or 19, imagine that it could come to what it eventually comes to. And yet, looking back as we can today, we can see that Putin was making these moves like in 2003, the incident with, is it called Tulia Island, and so on, that there's just threats backed with force again and again and again, and incidents, just as Russia's doing now all over Europe, provoking incidents in Ukraine and against Ukraine, and kind of muddying, I don't know, poking at the beehive, trying to stir up the bees and so on. It's some kind of patented methodology that he's got there. Anyway, it's quite a trip to yeah, to read something that's close to our hearts, but that was written at a time when and we're reading it at another time when we know we know more, I suppose, about what must have been going on since we see what then went on in these past 3 years. So
Yeah,
just makes me think about that.
yeah, I think that's exactly right, Lexicon. Also, the thing to remember at this point, Ukraine didn't have a lot of clout or understanding or legitimacy in the eyes of the world. There were a lot of people didn't understand that this was really a separate country, that this was not, this wasn't just some sort of break off provinces of Russia. Things have changed tremendously since then. Since Maidan, since 2014, people got a much clearer understanding of what Ukraine was, the value and understanding that Ukraine was, in fact, a separate nation. At this point, these concerns about legitimacy were unfortunately reflective of the lack of seriousness on the rest of the world, understanding what was going on here, and understanding that Ukraine was a separate country and culture and language and everything else that deserved to be protected and supported. That was not there. That by the time the full scale invasion happened, at least people understood that more. Um, yeah. Anyway. Okay. So, and what was going on was okay. We're talking about what was happening in these 3 months. This legitimacy crisis, and of course the annexation of Ukrainian territory by Russia. The next section is called Yanukovych Runs Away. February 22nd. Everybody's wondering where is Yanukovych. 70 Party of Regions members of the Rada resigned. which means they had a pretty good idea that he had bugged out. There was a question of who was in charge of the government at that point if the president is not there. Under the 2004 Constitution, the Speaker of the Rada should have taken over in the absence of the president. Under Yanukovych's constitution, it would have been the prime minister. But the Speaker, Speaker Rybak, the Speaker of the Rada, had resigned. There was a problem of which constitution was enforced because the bill that reverted to the 2004 Constitution had not been signed by the president, but it was passed by a huge majority in the Rada, and Yanukovych had signed an EU-brokered agreement with the opposition showing support for the new constitution. So all of that uncertainty is there. On the other side, there are thousands of protesters in the Maidan, and something has to be done, obviously. They say the alternatives are not possible as the institutions of the state were crumbling. So, as Wynnyckyj says, the formal legality had to take a backseat to substantive legitimacy. Yeah, Adam.
And there has to be a place for substantive legitimacy in these situations. I'm so bad at lending gravitas to these things, Robin, especially when I say things like that.
But yeah, no, but yeah.
No, and then the corgi starts barking. So the Muscals literally design these missions to confuse and stymie our institutions. We see it all the time. This is a pattern. It's active measures over and over and over again. Stay frosty.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think the thing to understand here, I mean, well, and actually we can see because of how this ended, that there were a lot of people of goodwill trying to do the right thing and trying to do things in as legitimate a way as possible under the circumstances, and it didn't come out right in the end. But this was a period of real, danger from internally and externally that had to be navigated through. So it turns out the next section is called Climax. February 22nd, 2014 was the climax of the protest phase of the revolution. Wynnyckyj, though, remarks that the atmosphere in the Maidan, there was not celebration, it was mourning. The center of the square had turned into a memorial site, and as I said, the coffins of the heroes were brought to the stage in pairs all day and on to waiting vehicles. I have a recording of Plivikacha. I think I'll play it toward the end if we have time. It's a beautiful, heartbreaking piece of it's a traditional. I think it's a traditional Lemko song. I believe I just read today. The Lemki are a tribe a group in the Carpathians who were decimated by the Nazis. A lot of them were deported. Pretty much most of the community was destroyed. Anyway, so in that day, there were massive political victories. The speaker and the first deputy both resigned. Is it Turchinov, Adam? Is that I'm?
Yeah, I think
Turchinov. Okay.
Is how he pronounces
it.
And that sounds correct.
Thank you.
In the
recording.
I got one thing to say about the Audible guy is really digs in. Like he just goes Kharkiv every time he says Kharkiv. It's like a super hard throaty. So usually I complain about these Audible narrators. Not this guy. Like his pronunciation is pretty good, and it's stark because he's very very, very proper speaking in the English language, and then he just goes Kharkiv. Anyways,
I love it. Yeah, sometimes I recorded books. Sometimes it's the foreign language pronunciations are really painful. I listened to a couple where I couldn't even finish the book. It was so bad. But good, glad to hear it. This book deserves a proper pronunciation. So the
Ruzzia guy.
Oh dear. Okay. So Turchinov and Poroshenko were announced as nominees for speaker, the speaker, as we said, under the new constitution would function pretty much as president until there was an election. Poroshenko took his name off the ballot immediately, so Turchinov was elected. Just to remind people, Alexander Turchinov had been the original commandant of the Maidan, so definitely an opposition leader. Interesting that Poroshenko took his name off the ballot. I wonder whether this was with an eye to running for president. I don't know that he didn't analyze why that happened. I don't know. Adam, do you have any feeling about that?
You think?
Okay. Thank you, Lexicon. Okay. That's what I thought. All right. Mr. Chocolate King. Anyway, okay, so let's see. Oh, let's see. His election as speaker was legitimate, but there was still a question about whether the powers extending to the whether his powers as speaker extended to acting president based on the 2004 Constitution. So there was no answer to this at the moment. They just had to somehow keep things going until they got to the next presidential election, when that would there'd be no question that was legitimate. Oh boy.
And is this? I didn't really understand from this, and maybe Lexicon knows who this. Who would appoint in either constitution? Who would decide who the prime minister is? I would understand it that they figure out after all the fallout and all the resignations who a leading coalition in this unity post Maidan government is, and then decide a prime minister.
Yeah.
Out of that,
I,
you know what I mean? So why couldn't they have just gone down that route? I didn't really get it.
I think the prime minister under Yanukovych's constitution would come out of what was it? I think it would come out of the Rada, which was controlled by the Party of Regions. Is that right, Lexicon? And under the later constitution, it would have been chosen by the president, or do I have that backwards?
I'm not sure.
Lexicon.
Like he says here, see in the 2004 version, the problem is that Yanukovych hasn't signed this decision to revert. It's so ridiculous. Like so the the guy that's run away hasn't signed it. It's like you can't have the revolution because the old guys didn't sign it. But anyway, what they're
Exactly.
saying here is that according to the 1996, which he had then, which had been fixed in 2004, but as soon as Yanukovych came in 2010, he reverts back to that one, and I think he does because the 2010, like the 96 constitutions, had the president appointing the prime minister, and he wants to do that. He wants to have that power. The problem here is that, of course, the prime minister has also run off and maybe along with the 70 other members of his party. So, but I think that that's their issue, and they don't have a provision in the old constitution for what you do if the former guy's gone. But this need to have the legitimacy of getting the fellows against whom you're revolting to sign. It's like a kind of a catch
Exactly.
22. It's like something that should be on Monty Python, but but you can't be king. We didn't vote for you to be. Who voted for you? I didn't vote for you. So anyway, it's
Yeah, and when you think about it too, I mean, what revolution
yeah,
goes by the laws of the previous?
yes,
I mean, it makes
exactly.
no sense. Yeah, exactly. I mean, God bless them. They really were trying. I mean, Ukraine wanted to be a country that had a rule of law, and they tried mightily to try to be as closely to whatever laws that were as possible. You have to give them a lot of credit for that, really. But yeah, it was sort of silly. But anyway, so yeah,
They were probably aware at the time of Kremlin disinformation media policies more than anyone else in the world, and knew how it would it how it would be used,
well, this
and
was a coup. This was an
and how it
American-led
was
coup,
used,
anyway.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. No, well, I mean, yeah, I think that is the case, and at least you can point to all this as attempts to do the legal thing. But of course, the Russians are going to call it whatever they want anyway. That I saw, what's his name, Kuleba, toward the beginning of the war, he got himself a T-shirt or a sweatshirt that said on it, it said Kievsky regime, the Kyiv regime, which is what the Russians always call it. I thought it was really funny. I wanted one like that. But anyway, uh, whatever. So okay, what happens at this point is Batchkivshena party leader, um, who was, I don't remember who that was. Well, never mind. They tabled another resolution that the Rada declaring the restoration of the 2004 Constitution as law, even in the absence of the signature. So, this was a sort of a way to give it a little more legitimacy. He calls it procedure delicacy. So they did that. Then Turchinov tabled a resolution declaring that Yanukovych had removed himself from office. This was a little sleight of hand, which I think was a good way to do it. The president could not be removed from office by the Rada, because that clearly would be unconstitutional in the form that it would have to have been done. But they declared that because he had removed himself from office, that the Rada relieved him of his duties, 328 members, which was a constitutional majority. So it was still on a little shaky ground, but it was a little bit closer to something that could be accepted as due process. Now, the issue really is this constitutional or not? Now, if this question came up, in order to decide this, 50 MPs would have had to challenged it and requested a ruling from the Constitutional Court. As he says, it would have been at least very unpopular and probably dangerous. The ruling would have taken months anyway, and there was only 3 months until the next presidential election, so it would have been moot anyway. So, I think all of this, it made the most sense to let it go through like this. It was a little bit iffy legally, but it did keep a structure and a governmental structure in place to get to the point where they could have presidential elections. Now, the next section is Lexicon referred to this before. Wynnyckyj calls fatal mistake. And Adam, let me get through this, and then you can explode on it. The February 23rd, they voted to rescind the law on languages published in 2012, which had provided official status to Russian in areas where more than 10% of the population requested it. He says he questions if this is political ineptitude or ideological extremism. And he calls this a fatal mistake. As Lexicon said, in the end, it wasn't ratified anyway. But go ahead, Adam.
I can't. Too many emotions.
I'll channel my inner Adam. This is Ukraine. Speak Ukrainian.
No. This is specifically for Lexicon. I don't know if she reads my notes that I send back. But Ukrainian Canadian maximalist opinion. Gibber. Ban that fascist imperialist Mongolian dialect, especially considering ensuing events. I don't want to hear it. That Klingon talk. But I just forest for the trees. How can the same excuse that the Nazis used for their cross-border genocide hold any such weight in the 21st century? It drives me crazy.
Adam,
We gotta protect our speakers and blah 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 blah. I don't care. If it's that important to you, move to Mother Russia. But no one's saying you can't speak it. No one's saying, oh, see, the corgi's left the room. Sorry, buddy, getting too heated. No one's saying you can't speak it. It's just, it's such a hair trigger. They denied this one law that allows official language status to our historical oppressors for the last 4 centuries, post the revolution in which they, attempted to subvert our free and blah, 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 blah. Give me a break. And I'm so glad now that many Ukrainians that I met when I was in Ukraine were former Russian speakers and don't spit a single phrase of that dirty, dirty imperialist. I never make it to the end of these rants. I just feel silly right at the last second.
Because your inner Canadian is trying to say sorry the whole time. No, I will.
Yeah, exactly.
I will say though. I mean, in terms of having Russia be an official language in any part of Ukraine, I agree with you. The issue really was that doing this at this time played right into propaganda, into Russian propaganda narrative.
And I understand it. Yeah,
And
I
also,
understand it.
I mean, this is, this continues to be an issue, not in terms of dividing the country, but in terms of, for example, I mean, Irina Farian, the late Irina Farian, who was murdered we're still not sure what presumably at the Russians' behest, although I don't think that's been proven yet. But she went after the Azov, the fighters, because they're Russian speakers, and basically saying they couldn't be true Ukrainian patriots because they speak Russian. And when we know what Azov has done and what they suffered and everything, there is. There are perfect. My friend Oleg's mother, who I spent the weekend with in Kyiv, her Ukrainian's is a little iffy. We had fun trying to communicate, the two of us in Ukrainian, but she's an absolutely 100% very strong Ukrainian patriot, and it's unfortunate that the language has become what it was used as an issue of division. I think Ukrainians don't allow it to be that anymore, but it is a complex issue. I think it's going to go away by itself because younger people aren't learning Russian anymore and have no interest in it. Even as you're saying, a lot of Russian speakers, people who didn't speak Ukrainian as all that fluently, are really working very hard to become fluent Ukrainian speakers. It was the issue here. I think what Wynnyckyj is saying. I mean, he lives in Kyiv, where there's a lot of Russian speakers. Still, it's not, it's a very bilingual city. I'm assuming his concern was more with the timing than it was with the issue itself. Anyway, whatever.
No, and he has to write a book and be an academic and be neutral and come across to a wide audience.
Yeah.
Everyone here knows me and my opinions, and I think we've all gained greater context, through the full-scale invasion here, of exactly how terrible, they are, especially those of us not living in Eastern Europe. I was raised Ukrainian in Western Canada in a very Ukrainian nationalist, anti-Russian,
Bandera
anti-Soviet
loving.
sort of paradigm. Yeah, exactly. Even even all Bucha and everything else opened my eyes to something that I didn't quite understand the extent of.
No, that is certainly true. That is certainly true.
Go ahead, James.
Ne Russo Mova. That's what I say.
Very good. James, Adam James is going to be eclipsing both of us with his Ukrainian pretty soon.
That's funny.
But it is a thorny subject. But and in the end, I don't want to and I said ban, give her, ban it, whatever. I don't want to prevent anyone from speaking the language that they want to speak in a democratic country. Fill your boots.
And that is, as you say, yeah.
But we're talking about official language status, giving air to these guys oppressed. Speak your language. I know it was a hard time. They were on, we've spoken this imperialist language for generations. It's hard to change. Whatever. But the idea that it's controversial that a country that has emerged from centuries of oppression would want to promote their language that was almost destroyed, Robin, and crushed out of existence, and they're using, and let's turn it around and say they're using the same excuse that Hitler used to annex Austria and invade the Sudetenland and invade Poland and instigate the greatest industrial killing in the 21st century by him and the Soviets. All excuses to destroy so many lives, and it was all just to protect speakers in other democratic countries. Give me a break. Sovereign borders are sovereign borders. Get out. Whew.
Yeah.
Sorry, the
No.
corgi's like at the
He's
other end of the
hiding, right?
basement now. Poor little
Poor
guy.
thing. Aw. No, but yeah, it is a point. I mean, like I've said before, I would have no trouble if in the United States, for example, we decided to make Spanish a second official language. Spanish is spoken by quite a significant minority in the United States, but Spanish is not the language of the people who were trying to destroy us for the last 300 years. I mean, it's a different.
You guys still speak that language, and it's no big deal. No one's claiming that English speakers need to be protected. Sorry,
Yeah.
to
No,
interrupt.
well,
Listen.
no, but yeah, but it's really true. I mean, nobody, as you're saying, I mean, there language scholars predicted that by the end of this century, certainly Ukrainian would have been completely destroyed and gone. Ukrainian language would have been gone if the Russians had been able to continue with this genocide, unchecked. I mean, that's a serious thing. I mean, it to allow the language that was used as the excuse to destroy Ukraine to be an official language is, yeah, it's really it's too much. I mean, I could say, in areas of the Hungarian speaking population, there's a big Hungarian, minority. Okay, let them have Hungarian as a second. It doesn't even have to be an official language. It can be a second language on documents. In the United States, a lot of documents have Spanish on it, not because it's an official language, but it's an accommodation to people. But yeah, I mean, this is a hot button issue, and it 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 I would, if I were Ukrainian, I would be opposed to it too. As much as I know people who speak Russian, and let them keep on speaking Russian, as you said, but not as an official language for an independent Ukrainian state. Ukrainian is the language of the state. Anyway,
And it doesn't need help. It obviously doesn't need help. Like
Russian, you mean? Yeah.
they have the at a population of however 150. It goes down every day, fortunately, but of over 100 million of Russian speakers. Like, it to me, the bottom line is it's an excuse that fascists have used in the past to cross borders. So it's
Yep.
nonsense. Shut up.
Yeah, agreed. And you know what? If not one single person in Ukraine spoke Russian anymore, that would not harm the Russian language. There's still millions of other people speaking it. So yeah, it's all an excuse.
So many dumb academics still promoting their existentially satanic and nihilistic literature on all ends. Like they're doing fine. Russian culture is well and promoted imperialistically for 4 centuries. We don't need to worry about them.
Yeah, well, this is typical of the Russian playbook anyway. Is to say that being done to them is what they're doing to other people. You think about it. Oh, we're so worried about the Russian language being suppressed in Ukraine. Yeah, right. I mean, what do you do in every inch of Ukraine you manage to get power over and have done for centuries to try to destroy the Ukrainian language? So go away. Anyway, okay. Um,
Sorry, I got us all.
yes, yeah, but it's
Got us
true. I mean,
all.
I mean, I love Ukrainian. It's a beautiful lyrical, poetic language, and Russia's good for calling the pigs. Let them keep it. Sorry to our Russian listening guests, as Chuck used to say. Anyway, okay, next section, Kharkiv, Donetsk, Crimea. In the meantime, as we're discussing all this, Yanukovych is having his little tour in eastern Ukraine. He goes to he wants to go to the Congress of People's Deputies of all level of governments from the southern and eastern regions, Sevastopol and Autonomous Republic Crimea. I love these Soviet titles for things. I mean, they go on, like for pages. Anyway, so he wants to go to this thing in Kharkiv. the oblast governor Dobkin asked him not to appear. Apparently, even in the Donbas, the multiple killings on the Maidan have led to enormous losses in support for the Party of Regions. They're afraid he's going to get whistled off the stage if he tries to take the stage. He said they could not guarantee his safety. At this point, it seems to be finally dawning on Yanukovych that he's in a precarious situation. So as a result, in true Russian manner, he records an interview saying he's not going to leave Ukraine, then immediately takes off. He goes to Donetsk, tries to fly out of Donetsk International Airport, but the customs officials wouldn't give him permission to depart, which I think is just absolutely priceless. I wish I could meet every one of those customs officials and shake their heads. I just think it's fantastic. Anyway, so he can't fly out of Donetsk because they won't give him clearance. So he ends up going to Crimea and finally ends up in Russia, where the SOB is still hanging out to this day with his buddy Vladimir. Anyway, over to you, Adam.
Isn't he an ambassador or something, or some
Oh,
such? For the Russians.
Lord only knows he's a sleaze bucket. Him and Medvedchuk, the two of them.
Oh, that's who I'm getting him mixed up with. Medvedchuk is now an ambassador or someone for them.
Oh, is he? Yeah, that's right. Boy, whatever. I'm not going to say anything more. Anyway, okay. So there are open questions that he asks, some of which I think may have become a little clear over time, but these are questions that Wynnyckyj asks. Okay, number one, why did Yanukovych concede power? Why didn't he stay in Kyiv and insist on that he was still the head of the government? The fact that he was packing up his bling and getting to get out of Dodge even before the mass killings. Which which leads to the second question: why did he flee? Was it supposed to be temporary? Where did Putin tell him that we'll get out of the way and we're going to institute chaos, and then you're going to ask Russia to invade and to counter these coup plotters, because of course this was not an organic movement coming from Ukrainians. This was at the instigation of either NATO or the United States or whoever. So was that the reason that he was just told to get out of the way, and Russia will be Russia will instigate these this chaos, and then he will be able to appeal to Russia to come in and restore order. The bottom line, as Wynnyckyj says, is Yanukovych choked. He couldn't cause further. He couldn't call on the troops to cause further bloodshed on the Maidan. He just took out of town. I think maybe he realized he was likely to get himself lynched if he stuck around. I'm not sure, but anyway, yeah.
Well, he mentions that the governor, his appointed governor, said he couldn't guarantee his safety at that conference.
Right. Yeah, and I think he points out a little bit later on that at that conference, if he had had spoken and ginned up some support, it could have led to a breakup of the country, with the East siding, asking Russia to come in and save them from those nasty, nationalist fascists in Kyiv. He didn't do it though, and yeah, it's interesting.
It's a game of inches.
Yes.
Like, how much would history have changed?
Exactly.
If he had the cojones, as it were, colloquially speaking.
Yes. Well, since we use Spanish in this country, so that's good. Yeah. So he didn't attend the Kharkiv Congress, and he didn't assert himself as a legitimate president there, and denounced Turchinov as a usurper who was staging a coup. So that was and as you said, as we were saying, if this could have led to a de facto breakup of Ukraine. Did you want to add this, Adam?
Well, yeah, and he says maybe he'll go more into it, but I really like his theories here. At least at the time of writing, and it seems that this was Volya's original plan. Full-scale invasion would have gone very differently in 2014 than what we saw in February 2022 after 8 years of of Western training and reforms and everything.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, really, there were some almost miraculous things that happened in 2014. It would have been a cakewalk for Russia to take over all of Ukraine. And Yanukovych had completely decimated the military. And there was no, as we'll get into later, there was absolutely no money left in the budget. Wait until you hear the dollar amount of what the entire Ukrainian treasury held at one point when after Yanukovych and his hench people drained it. It's really astonishing. It's astonishing that Ukraine managed to pull things out. I mean, really. Anyway, so where was I? Okay. Oh yeah. So okay, the issue was, if they could have requested, help from Moscow. In the west of Ukraine would have found themselves isolated since the east would be getting support from Russia. The west had not been receiving aid from Western countries because of the questions about the formal legitimacy of the government. I mean, Russians had no trouble supporting Yanukovych whether he was legitimate or not because it would get them what they wanted. But those our Western countries had too many scruples to actually help, and would have if that had happened. Yeah, go ahead.
Robin, the country in which the president changed the constitution so that he could have more terms is questioning our legitimacy. Oh no.
Huh? Wasn't actually changed.
Just Hoyla didn't he change the
Oh, oh,
constitution
oh,
so he could
oh,
continue being
yes.
president?
Oh, that's exactly right. Yeah, yeah, and also he had Medvedev be putative president for one term so that he could come. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, it's just this again and again. I mean, this is it gets to be boring after a while. Anything Russia accuses Ukraine of, assume that it's the opposite, and that's what Russia's doing. Yeah, and exactly here too. Yep. So anyway, okay. So let's see where we're.
Or the West, or Kazakhstan, or Poland, or countries, or India,
Georgia.
or
Yeah,
anyone that they accuse of anything. Yeah.
exactly. So okay. All right. Let me just see. Oh yeah. So and basically, like I said, he blinked. He finally on March 3rd asked for assistance from Russia, but by that point, he was like so far out of power that it didn't go anywhere. Um, Now, this was a little interesting thing. On September 2013, Putin's special advisor on Ukraine, which sort of that makes my blood run cold, that Putin has a special advisor on Ukraine. Sounds like planning the final solution. Anyway, this Glaziev, I guess is his name, said that if Ukraine had signed the EU association agreement, it would mean the cessation of Ukrainian sovereignty, in quotes. Um, Wynnyckyj says at this time he thought it was metaphorical, but this was in 2013. But at the time, it turns out that the covert plan to dismember Ukraine was probably already being put in motion. So his and actually the fact that they didn't sign the association agreement didn't seem to have slowed that plan down all that much. Adam.
Oh, finding the mic button. Yeah, this is why we need to put a wall around Absurdistan. The modern world is complex enough without having world leaders that speak in riddles. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for coming to Adam's TED Talk. Yeah, no, it's exactly right. I mean, the Russians. I mean, the Russian government, Putin, all this, they never. It's nothing is ever just straight talk. All of it is like shrouded in all these levels of deception and everything. Yeah, I agree. So next section is Crimea. Now, it's not enough that all this is going on in the Donbas. Of course, at the same time, the Russians are solidifying, getting ready to take over Crimea. February 23rd were the first pro-Russian demonstrations in Crimea, in Sevastopol, which was the home of both the Ukrainian and Russian Black Sea fleets at that time. On February 24th, the day after, the Yanukovych appointed mayor of Sevastopol resigns because he said, "Those who appointed me have left." In Simferopol, the capital of Crimea, there was on February 26th, a couple of days later, there was a meeting of the Crimean Parliament that was scheduled. There were rumors that separatist initiatives were going to be tabled at that meeting. In response to that, there was a demonstration of over 12,000 people, Tatars, Ukrainians, and pro-Ukrainian ethnic Russians. That's important to remember, the pro-Ukrainian ethnic Russians, versus about 5,000 members of this Russian Unity Party, which had only gotten 4% in the previous election. There were negotiations between the Tatar delegation and Speaker Konstantinov, who was the speaker of the Crimean Parliament. They decided they together asked the protesters to disperse, thinking the situation was defused. But on that night, the little green men that we've heard of arrived. Little green men was really GRU special forces, Russian special forces, but they showed up with no insignias, no nothing. They occupied the Crimean Verkhovna Rada building. So this was really the beginning of the invasion. On February 27th, there was no quorum there because it was, the members of the Rada were afraid to show up, really. They elected Sergei Aksyonov as the prime minister. He was a Russian stooge. This again was not legal because by law any candidate for prime minister in Crimea has to be submitted to the Rada by the president of Ukraine, which obviously didn't happen. And his first statement was,
He was absent.
Yeah.
He was in Crimea.
Right, exactly.
He was sailing on the Moskva to Rostov on Don at the time.
Yes, exactly. Was it on the Moskva really, or are you joking? But
there was such a confusing sentence, and we'll get to
okay.
it. We'll get to it.
Anyway, so his statement, this newly elected, supposedly elected prime minister, who was not elected because they didn't have a quorum, but whatever. He said, in this difficult time, the Russian Federation, I am sure, will extend a helping hand and will provide assistance, including financial, so that Crimea will be able to reconstruct its political situation quickly. And I just love that. Reconstruct its political situation. I mean, just think about that for a moment. What could that possibly mean? Reconstruct its political situation. Its political situation was just fine until the Russians invaded. So exactly what are they reconstructing? Well, we know what they're reconstructing anyway. So that's my candidate for euphemism of the year. Anyway. So anyway, Adam.
Well, Mike's, I was looking for the quote, but he goes, I'll get to my note here, but I can't remember where it is. I'm probably skipping ahead, Robin. I apologize in advance. But there's this one sentence, and it says, Yanukovych, when he decommissioned finally got to the southern coast of Crimea, he decommissioned his personal Ukrainian Secret Service bodyguards and crossed over into the base, the leased territory of the base. And then it says he sailed on Moscow to Rostov on Don, but not any of us here in the West know that famous ship that's now a submarine as the Moscow. It's the Moskva.
I bet you're right. Oh, wow.
And that sentence, like, I went, hit the 30 seconds back on Audible listening to it like 4 times. But anyways, my note pertaining to the current thing, Soviet loyalties. I think this was probably Huila's last chance to pull this sort of thing off, with all of these near retirement officers who started their careers under the USSR. How many of these treasonous officers have retired from the Russian Navy in the last 10 years? My guess would be a vast majority of them.
Yeah, this was, we'll get into that. This was one of the really, the sad things with the number of Ukrainian service people who, to start with, misunderstood or didn't really understand that they were not colleagues with the Russians, and unfortunately, a large portion of them really committed treason and joined the Russians, and it's a horrible thing. But we do also talk about some people who stood up. Anyway, so the little green men we talked about, they okay. We don't need to go through all the specifics here, but they solidified.
I found it.
Okay, go ahead.
It was at the end. It was right before the open questions section. So here it is on the paperback on page 139. On 28 February, the ousted Ukrainian president surfaced at the press conference broadcast from the Russian city of Rostov-on-Don. Viktor Yanukovych looked tired. Oh, I started reading at the wrong spot. Oh, what a dum-dum. No, it's right here. He had apparently been evacuated on a Russian warship, brought to the port of Novorossiysk to Moscow, and then to Rostov-on-Don. And that makes no sense.
You're absolutely
Like
right. Yeah, yeah.
geographically, Oscar, and I was like, what? But they're talking about he was brought to the port of Novorossiysk to the capital ship Moskva, and then to Rostov-on-Don.
I remember at the time wondering what I did. I just went past it, but yeah, no, that's got to be what it means, because you don't go from Novorossiysk to Moscow and then to Rostov-on-Don. That makes no sense. Yeah, could be. And now it's a submarine, along with the massive Russian submarine fleet in the Black Sea.
Beautiful. Just a connection. And I just thought that was important.
Yep.
Anyways, let's keep
Let's get-
going back to the forward.
Yes. Okay. So anyway, as I said, they took over the Belbek military airport, which we've heard about recently with things blowing up all around it, and Simferopol International Airport.
Oh, Lexicon's waving here.
Go ahead,
Oh,
Lexicon.
she's had her hand up forever.
Oh, has she?
No, not forever. I just put it up and I thought I'd wave before you got too far because I was just trying to, something was occurring to me. I thought, where did I hear this? So I just was looking yesterday at something. Reznikov has been somewhere or other speaking was he at there's been a Riga conference. Can't remember where he was. I watched most of it on YouTube, and Reznikov, who used to be Minister of Defense, and before Umerov, and he's a diver apparently, and he's done 300 dives or something, and so he says that the Moskva is sitting on a shelf. Because there's a point. Actually, Sevastopol is one of the most fabulous deep water harbors in the world because it's at a point that big sort of, it would be an estuary if it was a river, but it's not. It's a deep bay or fjord or something. But it's where the fault, where the floor drops off. But where the Moskva went down, it's right kind of at the edge of that drop off. So it's only, he says, about 40 meters down. And so he says it will become a wonderful tourist attraction after the war. And he invites people to come and join him, and they can go gazing at swimming through and around the Moskva later on. So there's the first answer to where exactly it sat when it sank.
Yeah, I love it. He actually did. It's got to be at least a year ago because the Moskva went down before that. I think he did a really funny thing that almost was like a pseudo ad for a diving center. It was hysterical, where they showed they had some ship in dock that apparently was pretty much the same thing as the Moskva, and you would go there, and then you'd see where everything is, and then they show Reznikov and a bunch of guys in this one of these rubber dinghies motoring out to somewhere, and then the closing credits come on about the diving center in on the Black Sea. It was really hysterically funny. So yeah, I miss him. He was really entertaining. Just Umarov. I don't know what I think about Umarov. I mean, I think he might be quite competent, but boy, he's not as entertaining as Reznikov was. Which of course is no reason to be defense minister, but whatever. All right, back to serious things here. Okay, so we've got them taking over the military airport and the international airport. They slowly occupied all the television and broadcast centers, cut land telephone lines, jammed mobile phone signals near Ukrainian bases. the Ukrainian army was at this point was quite demoralized after 5 years of Yanukovych basically hollowing them out and being thinking that they're with their buddies, and their buddies have suddenly turned on them. So um, and as this is going on, February 20th, the Verkhovna Rada officially asked for intervention from the guarantors of territorial integrity under the Budapest Memorandum. President Obama responded by expressing deep concern, and that was it. I mean, this will go down as one of the most scandalous betrayals of a commitment in history. I mean, it's horrifying. And, I don't know that the UK actually said anything, but they didn't show up either to help. So, you know, Ukraine got no help from the guarantors who instigated that they give up all their nuclear weapons and their long range bombers and everything else in the interest of peace. But peace turned out to be Russky Mir. Anyway, does mir mean, Lexicon, does mir mean peace in Russian also, along with world?
Yeah, that's right. It means world and it means peace. So they have this joke, "Хочу мир," or do you want, peace? Yes, I do. Can I have all of it? Because, it's a pun that just works in Russian and
Interesting.
Ukrainian. So, yeah, I want the world. I want it all.
But the thing is, in Ukrainian, it's a different word. That svit means
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. So
means
it is a
world.
Russian joke. That's right.
Yes, but yeah, and so there's Ruski Mir.
Good.
Yeah. Adam, our Ukrainian nationalist speaks. All right. Anyway, okay. So yeah, like I was saying, Obama expressed deep concern. That and 275 will get you right on the subway. Okay. So on March 1st, now remember, let's see, when was this? February 26th, in the middle of the night, these little green men show up. On March 1st, the upper house of the Duma in Russia votes unanimously for the invasion, which had already happened 3 days early, which I thought that was sort of nice. They decided to give it a patina of legitimacy. Um, Okay. And as a response of an appeal by the Crimean prime minister questionable legitimacy, who had asked for Russian intervention. Um, okay, so as we talked about before, many of these Ukrainian troops who were stationed in Simferopol, in Sevastopol, thought that these Russians were their friends and allies. And yes, you make a good point here, Adam.
Oh, I think I skipped ahead a
You
point
did, yes, but
because I already said this.
oh yes, you did. Okay, never mind. Adam already said this. Basically, so that there's still
Oh my
a
God.
Soviet loyalties. Yeah, and as I said, there were many cases of treason. Um, People were brought up. This is 2014. A lot of people in the military at that time were old enough to have been brought up on tales of brotherhood, in quotes, in big quotes, from the Soviet period. And because they were in the East, and many of them were, they were getting their news from Russian in Russian language, either local and Russian media. So they had this brotherhood myth, really a myth, and portrayals of the Maidan and Kyiv government as fascist and nationalist, as opposed to Russian language. They also had opportunities to continue military careers with higher salaries and better equipment in the Russian military. Of 13,468, only 3,990 remained loyal, which is just heartbreaking. But Adam, you make an important point here. He talked about the higher salary and better equipment.
Yeah, he only mentions this discrepancy between equipment and salaries and uniforms and passing. But we have to remember that Yanukovych, on instructions from Russky Mir, had gutted the Ukrainian army for years and purposefully made it weak and ineffective and used it as enriching contracts for his cronies. And that's just what they did. And it was part of the big Novorossiya plan that was underway for quite a long time. And I just feel like Maidan got in the way of things that were already in the works.
Yeah, I think that's clear. The Maidan, they would have instigated something if the Maidan had not happened. This I think is absolutely clear, and all of this stuff was in place years before this. But yeah, anyway, so okay, now within all these sad stories of treason and everything in Crimea, he does bring up two incidents which I think need to be mentioned because we need to, recognize that they were people who stayed loyal, abided by their oath of loyalty to Ukraine. One of them was Colonel Yuli Mamchur, who was the commander at the Baalbek Air Force Base, and he basically faced off the little green men who were surrounding the base and had raised the Russian flag. They pushed past them, got back into the base and removed the Russian flag and put the Ukrainian flag back up again. So that was one story. Hang on just a second. I can't walk and chew gum at the same time. Just a moment. Okay, good. And the second one was on the 21st of March. The commander of the command of the Sevastopol Naval Academy was transferred from Ukraine to Russia. And this is really, this shows how interconnected it all was. That where would an invading army take over the military training ground of one country and turn it into their own? But here they did. When this happened, there was a small group of cadets who stood at attention and loudly sang the Ukrainian anthem as the Russian flag was raised. Then they smartly turned their backs on the whole proceedings and left. They were eventually were able to get out of the Russian-occupied Ukraine and were transferred to the Ukrainian Naval College in Odessa, and each was given a command of a vessel in the Ukrainian Navy after graduation. So again, people whose hand I would like to shake. Okay, the next section is called referendum and annexation. And he puts referendums in quotation marks. In March 16th, they had this referendum in Crimea. There were two choices on the ballot. Did they want to have the reunification of Crimea with Russia to become a constituent part of the Russian Federation, or do they want to renew the 1992 constitution with Crimea as a part of Ukraine? Now, okay, those are the two choices. They did not give a choice to that for Crimea to remain an autonomous republic. Not that it would matter anyway, because this was clearly the result was determined before anybody voted on anything. It was condemned. This election was condemned by the EU, the US, the UK, and many other states. There were no international observers. It was an obviously falsified, especially since the vote in favor was a Russian or Saddam Hussein kind of thing. 96.77% vote in favor. 96.77% of Ukrainians do not agree on anything. This is just, ridiculous. You never, you never get statistics like that. So anyway, this was, and it obviously falsified. Another thing that made it quite obvious is they claimed that the turnout in Sevastopol amounted to 123% of the total population. That's the total population, including children. But somehow more people voted. 123% of the total population of Sevastopol miraculously turned up to the polls. So, anyway.
Well, I vote twice when I'm real excited, don't you?
Well, like in Chicago, they used to say vote early and often. Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, it's, what a surprise. Russia held a sham election and got the result they wanted. It knocked me over with a feather.
Yeah, exactly, Robin.
Okay, you have a substantive note here, dear. So if you'd like to go over that.
I got back in time for it. Again, designed active measures to some extent to muddy the waters of international opinion. I've had many conversations with otherwise reasonable, intelligent people in real life who hold this referendum up as some evidence that Crimea wanted to, and this is the best part, return to Russia, quote unquote. Never mind the details, a referendum held under occupation, administered and tallied by the occupiers. Like,
And like this, like there was any return that would be happening anyway.
well, and then and then that's what you try to explain to these people is that it was never Russian. It was always a colony, in fact, that they deported the vast majority of the indigenous population on multiple occasions, didn't let them to return for 80 years or 50 years or whatever it was. And then even then under the Soviet Union, anyways, we all know that terrible genocide that was perpetrated by Stalin. And all of this
And
just gets
renewed
lost
by
in the,
Putler after renewed after 2014. They started deporting Tatars from Crimea again.
well, yeah, it like out of those 12,000 people who were at that original counter demonstration that he mentioned in an earlier part of the chapter, how many of those had to flee? How many of them are now, deported somewhere else or, in custody?
Yeah, exactly. And this, I mean, this is the argument against any idiot who says that Ukraine should give up land for quote unquote peace. It's not land we're talking about. We're talking about leaving Ukrainian citizens to be tortured and murdered by the Russians. Any area that's left for Russia to have control over. So it cannot even, it should not be in the conversation even, because we have ample evidence of what Russia does to Ukrainians when they have them in their clutches. Anyway, so as this is going on, March 18th is the annexation. Putin, and this is the formal, they vote to annex Crimea based on this vote. And Putin presents this revisionist history.
And he doesn't
And
mention that he went from, completely denying it was happening and then to going to parliament and having it ratified officially almost a month later, after 3 weeks of that's not us, we didn't do it.
yeah, exactly. Well, this is, the Snyder points out in The Road to Unfreedom that, they consider logic and being consequent an evil Western import. Part of their technique is to confuse people by maintaining different opinions that are incompatible. And Lavrov does that all the time with a totally straight face. Will say three things that just can't exist together, but you expected to accept it. So it's anyway. And okay, so this revisionist history and manifesto, and this is portent. Anybody who thinks there's going to be peace with Russia, that they'll be able to negotiate something. This manifesto, which vast majority of Russians buy into, is that Russians throughout the former USSR, and I'd extend that to former areas of Soviet influence, including the Baltics, that they desire and deserve to live in one country. And the
Nazi
United
stuff.
States,
Nazi
yep,
stuff.
Nazi stuff. Yep.
Alert.
Yes, if you needed it. The United States was at fault for breaking up the Russian nation, and Russia would avenge the mistreatment of co-ethnics. And along with this, most ominously, as Wynnyckyj says, and I agree, he points out that Kyiv is the mother of all Russian cities. So Kyiv belongs to Russians and Russia almost more than any place else, because this is their mother city.
This was obviously written before his manifesto, like in writing in the summer of 2021.
Oh yeah. He was working on the bullshit at this point already. Him and Dugin and other. Jeez, I mean, well, whatever. So he said, "This is," and this I've seen before. It's a famous quote. Ancient Rus which has nothing to do with Russia, by the way, guys. Ancient Rus is our common source, and we cannot live without each other. Which, I mean, what the hell does that mean? We can't live with each other? Ukrainians can't live with the Russians. What does he mean? We can't live without each other? I guess he means that they need to be able to lord it over the Ukrainians, rape the land for every natural resource, and have Ukrainians under their thumb for their abilities and their talents. I mean, because what does that mean? We can't live without each other. I mean, seriously.
This is where the crazy ex-girlfriend memes come out. Like, I burnt
Yes,
your house
yes.
down so we could live together. Go ahead, Lexicon.
Yeah, exactly. And like we say that without Ukraine, there's no empire. And actually, the article that I mentioned before we started this is one of this floating, sending up a trial balloon peace offer. It's actually one of the first times we see somebody saying, "No, no, no, no. Ukraine exists. There's no such notion that Russia can't exist without, or that Ukraine is essential to Russia." But the fact is, yeah, this really rings for me, this line, because it's another thing I've mentioned before. In 2013, in November, when this stuff is happening, I'm attending Russian classes at McGill University, and our teacher asks us about, and a lot of the kids in that class, it's advanced and it has heritage learners. So there's a lot of Ukrainians and Russians in the class. And she asks what people think about these demonstrations going on. And at this time, the IMF is offering about 17 billion and or 15, and Russia, Moscow is offering an 17 or 15 billion. Like, on the two sides, there are these competing offers to Ukraine, and the tension is over. Yeah, well, so there's already, Yanukovych has already refused to sign, and she's asking. We're having sort of a current events class, and she asked the class what they think about which way will Ukraine go and which way should Ukraine go, and they talk about it, and some of them got parents back home in Odessa and stuff. Anyway, there's various comments, and so that's kind of the last thing in the class, I guess, talking about current events. And the class is breaking up, and the teacher, who is a young, relatively young, or middle-aged Russian woman, originally from Tomsk, and she is saying, "But of course, Ukraine cannot leave us. Imagine what could." Ukraine, Kyiv, our mother, the source of our culture. And I had never heard it before. I didn't know that this was a common trope. And hearing this and thinking, oh my God, these people are really off their rocker. But she was swearing it like a what do you call them? A paragraph in her catechism, like the first of the Ten Commandments. And so, yeah, I mean, this was a particularly strengthened statement under the philosophy of Putin's various mentors and people like Dugin that he brought up and promoted. So this line has been shoved into the Russian people in the course of Putin's presidencies, and I don't know to what extent people talked about it before, but
Centuries.
well,
Russian
to say
greatness.
this,
They've always felt this way. They were
they
the
felt this
dominant of
way.
the
Is this a
Slavs.
trope? Is this a trope that they use? Anyway, hearing her speak this like a catechism, it just hit me like a cold front, and it's when you see that somebody is like sort of in a cult or something, and there's no way that you can get through. Because, like you, Adam, I hadn't been brought up in as militant a part of the country and family, but nonetheless, I never had any notion that we belong to Russia. I mean, I never would have occurred to me. So,
The point that he's unwittingly making here is that, and something that Snyder talks about in that wonderful article that James gave to some of us. Snyder spoke recently at the at it was a um, security institute in Kyiv. But that Russia doesn't have its own history and culture. They're saying all of their culture and history is actually Ukrainian. They're saying that's where it came from, which is admitting the fact that they have nothing, they have nothing of their own. So it's sort of ironic, but I mean, it is a very good point. If they have to constantly harken back to things that really are Ukrainian, then where is their culture and where is their history?
Well,
Um,
yeah, when
Mongolia.
yeah,
Khrushchevsky's,
exactly.
yes. Well, and that former Mongolian president was very funny a few months ago when he was doing these posts on Twitter saying, "Okay, you can come back home to me if you want." This is when people were talking about reasserting their ancient borders, and he put a map up. But yeah, he's a funny guy and not like the current one. But yeah, I'll go back to my boyfriend there. Khrushchevsky's pamphlet in 1904, which he succeeds in getting published in Russia, is about, towards a proper rendering of Russian, Belarusian, and Ukrainian history. And his pamphlet is about how you folks in Russia have never properly written your own history, and until you do, you won't really have a grasp of yourselves. And that's where he lays out how by kind of swallowing up what is Ukraine's history and Belarus's history as well, and lumping them into one thing and pretending there's some continuity, and kind of ignoring the 3 centuries in the swamps in between the fall of Rus and of Kyiv, and when Muscovy Duchy starts swallowing up Kazan, and goes on and on, swallowing up tribes around it. So, but anyway, he says that until you write your own history, you won't have one. It's a good pamphlet, and but so there's an assertion of this. So you're quite right that they've been doing it forever. But he points out, as a historian and historiographer, the fallacy and the pitfalls of writing your history that way. And then, as you say, Adam, they get left with this emptiness, this nothingness, because they don't really know where they arose from. Since if that myth were to be lost, they don't know what the answer would be.
Yeah, yeah, that's the
They,
point that
yeah, sorry.
Snyder is making. Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
Exactly, and that they omit it. It's like how they completely omit the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact from their history, their imperialist history. They also completely omit the fact that they became the dominant Slavic principality because they were the enforcers of the Golden Horde, and uh, and nothing is a better allegory for their history for me is the fact, they're Slavs, but they learned this other extreme expansionist imperialist raping, murdering, killing across the lands type of idea from uh, those guys to the east who have moved way past that now, we can say, but you guys still didn't drop it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I remember when I was first learning about all this, I asked a Ukrainian friend of mine, why is it why is it that Russia and Ukraine, why they're so different culturally and everything else? It's exactly what he said. It was the Mongols. While Ukraine was facing westward, had a renaissance, had an enlightenment and all of that. The Russians were learning from the Mongols how to be better invaders and imperialists. So yeah, that's exactly right. Now, Adam, I see we have 3 minutes left here. We're not going to get to the end of the chapter. I'm just going to mention a couple of things that at this point, yeah, they've annexed Crimea based on this incredibly favorable and unbelievable referendum. Um, they are making veiled and open threats against neo-Nazi Russophobes and anti-Semites that supposedly had taken power in Kyiv. Um, NATO's allied commander in Europe, United States Air Force General Philip Breedlove, uh, is loudly pointing out that there are Russian troops amassing on the border. And then in an example of positively British understatement. Wynnyckyj says that Ukraine could not continue the policy of extreme restraint that had been exercised in Crimea, even though the Ukrainian armed forces were no match for Russia. Yeah, I would say. Um, but at this point, there's a prospect for an imminent full-scale invasion. So we're gonna call it. We're gonna end here. We will finish this chapter at the next time. We're going to be we'll be using this 3 hour format, I think, from now on, unless we have unless there's a change. But we plan to do it this way. This works a lot better, Adam. We actually have time to
Well, we
talk
can
about things a little bit.
blabber and go through the day's news for the first little bit because it's not a 24-hour thing. So people got to get caught on and get the reminders. And I've just noticed that these Volya, the listeners always end up never, the first half hour is pretty scant for people, and people just roll in as the hour progresses. So no reason to start book club right from the start.
Yeah, it's good. It's as I said, I fully expect that we'll have more hours of programming pretty soon. But yeah, at this point, and thank you everyone who's come. I know that you guys are paying attention to our announcements and making a point of coming when we start this space up. It's really, really appreciated, and it's so nice to see so many of our old friends here. I've been looking, just going down through, and I won't mention anybody because I'd have to mention a lot of people. But it's great to see you guys. Thank you for joining us. And we're going to finish up now. I remind everyone that Prince Heather and Princess Cannoli and Lita have already started their Easy Borscht. What is it called? Wait, not easy. The Borscht Chronicles. This is not on Volya Radio, but if you go up to the top, of the display when we close out, you should find it. If not, you can go to my retweet of Prince Heather's announcement, or to Prince Heather's account, and find the link. So I hope to see you guys over there. I think it's going to be fun. Thank you, Adam. It's a pleasure to always lexicon. Thank you add so much to our discussions. So I would just like to end by saying Slava Ukraini.
Heroyam Slava.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Побачимо скоро. See you all soon. Night.
Welcome to Volya Radio. Slava Ukraini. Welcome to Volya Radio. Slava Ukraini.